I'm a Chinese woman, but I grew up in Sydney, Australia. However, I was born in Beijing, but on the outskirts of it in a large town called Yungang Residential District, where my mum's family is from. When I was 5, I immigrated to Australia, but my family would still travel back to China every few years. This incident happened in the snowy winter of 1997, when I was about 11 years old. So my parents still lived in Yungang and introduced me to a brother and sister who lived in the same building as them. I can't remember their exact ages, but I think the older girl was around 14 and the younger boy was around 6. I still remember the exact outfit I was wearing, as I'd been wearing the same outfit all trip. At that time, flared jeans were in, and coming from Australia, I wasn't prepared for the snow and coldness of the Chinese winter. And so on my first or second day there, my Chinese cousin had taken me to a shopping mall where she'd helped me haggle down the price of a bright pink duffel coat with fluffy white trimming. I thought that it was the most fashionable thing ever, and I wore it pretty much every day. I have photos of me from that trip wearing that exact outfit, in fact. Anyway, we walked around town and ended up going to this very large park with a lake inside it. It was a little bit of a distance from the center of town, but we were playing by the shore, throwing rocks, joking around, and just having a good time. At some point, I looked up and realized that it was getting close to dusk, although it probably wasn't very late, but considering that it was winter and the sun set early, that might explain it. The park, which had been very busy to start with, was nearly deserted at this point. There were still some other people, but they were a fair distance away from us at this point. All except for 2 men who suddenly approached us. They were middle to late middle-aged, the uncle type, I guess. One of them approached me and said that he was a friend of my father's, and that he'd been asked to pick us up. I remember being confused because my dad didn't live in this town and was in another district, about 2 hours away in Beijing, where his family were from. Pretty quickly I realized that something was off, and so did the brother and sister that I was with. We all started making excuses and sort of backing off. I still remember very clearly that as we started backing away, the man who approached us looked back over his shoulder at his companion, as if asking him what should we do. And it was then that I noticed that his companion was standing a little distance away beside a white van with the door already slid open. To this day, I believe, too, that he was considering snatching one of us and making a run for it. However, perhaps because there were 3 of us, and also perhaps because there were still people around in the peripheries, they didn't do anything. As I walked away rapidly, I looked back over my shoulder and remember seeing the 2 men just sort of standing there watching us go. That 15 to 20 minute walk back was one of the scariest walks in my life, as I imagined someone grabbing me from behind every second. The sun had just set as we got into my building and burst in through the door, so happy to be home and safe. I did tell my mum and grandmother about it, but at the time, child kidnappings in China, while already definitely happening, were much less of a massive and widespread news story as it is now. I think my mum especially felt that my being almost kidnapped was somehow a commentary on her parenting skills or whatever, and was very dismissive and even now dislikes it when I bring it up. Now that organized child and or bride kidnappings are such a huge story in China, it often makes me shiver at night to think just how different my fate could have been. There have been so many stories about young women or girls kidnapped and forced into becoming brides of villages and remote countrysides, sometimes tied to beds and having their legs broken to prevent them from running away. No one in the village will help them because almost all the men in the village have purchased brides from traffickers in this way. There's also children, usually boys, kidnapped into families who have been unable to have kids or adopt legally. They fare a bit better, but can also be abused and neglected. Now that I have my own kids and I'm safe and warm in my bed in Sydney, I sometimes think about how wildly and irrevocably my life might have derailed that snowy evening in Yungang, and honestly, I shiver. To start this off, I'm 21 and a single mum to a beautiful 9-month-old. I live in a granny flat at the back of my parents' property. The previous tenants were the previous owner's daughter and 2 granddaughters. Apparently the daughter, a single mum, often had a fleeting relationship that would move in and out of the flat as well. And when I moved in last year, September, I was still pregnant. The very first night, something watched me while I slept too, I'm sure of it. I could see it, but I couldn't really feel its presence, I guess. My cat wouldn't stop staring in the direction of the door as well. And now, I didn't know this, but there's a motion sensor light in one of the top corners of my room, apparently, facing the door. The reason I didn't know this is because it would turn on and stay on, even when neither I nor my cat were moving. This happened again the next afternoon, and I asked my mum to bless my house, as that was normally something that we do when we would move into a new house or weird stuff happens anyway. After my mum blessed my place, things were fine again until October, when I started seeing shadow people in my parents' house. I could see and feel them watching me, and I felt that they were angry that I ignored them. Like, I don't know how I got to that conclusion, but it's just the way that I felt. After my daughter was born, my mother blessed the flat again, and everything felt fine again. But whenever anyone comes into my flat, they always say that they feel like they're not alone, that something is watching them and that it is angry. And this all brings me to the past 3 months when my baby started with what we thought was sleep regression. She would wake up screaming bloody murder like she was hurt, and wouldn't fall back asleep unless I held her and went to go sleep on the couch in the TV room with her. I am at this point exhausted, frustrated, and I often find myself getting extremely angry, to the point where I walk away and have to just scream somewhere, which I can't help but feel ashamed about. I recently started dating again as well, and my boyfriend comes to sleep over on the weekends. He has an amazing relationship with my daughter and treats her like his own. When he's over, it feels like the things that are in my flat are somewhat appeased, I guess. My daughter doesn't wake up at all as well, and every night that my boyfriend leaves, she's a scream machine again. She hasn't known him for long at all and isn't very attached to him or anything either, so that strikes at the possibility of missing him, as well as the fact that this happens Sunday to Thursday every night. My mum and I loosely theorized that this thing in my house was created by some residual energy from the previous single mum. I have heard that there's a name for that kind of entity, but I can't remember what the name of it is. Other things I've experienced too are something calling my nickname, and when I go looking, nobody is ever there. Foul smells that are honestly just horrible. Things just go missing and reappear in weird places, mostly religious stuff as well. Knocks all over the place. I forgot to add too that when I pick my daughter up from her cot, which is right next to my bed, she starts looking around like frantically and hyperventilates for like minutes afterward. So, if you've experienced anything like this and know of what I can do about it without actually contacting whatever is in this place, then please do let me know, because sincerely, I am a drained, tired mother and I need some help. From Wondery, I Hear Fear is a new anthology series of suspenseful stories hosted by Carrie Mulligan. These stories are inspired by true events and real places, so the next sound you hear could be your own scream. In each episode of I Hear Fear, you'll be treated to a new psychological thriller. A forest monster who lures teens into the woods and never lets them return. A line of beauty products that takes the search for youth to dark extremes. And an EDM party that turns deadly when the DJ takes over more than just the dance floor. These might sound like urban legends, but I Hear Fear proves that the scariest stories of all are the ones that are true. Carrie Mulligan actually has a really soothing voice, which personally I loved because she creates a very relaxed atmosphere. I know some of you guys enjoy downtime with scary stories like I do as well, and so if this is you, then I highly recommend you check it out. I Hear Fear will introduce immersive horror and lead you straight into the heart of darkness. prepare to be taken on a journey into the unknown. Follow I Hear Fear on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also binge all the episodes of I Hear Fear ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus. So my girlfriend and I, we were visiting the Arches and Canyonlands area for the weekend and ended up heading out pretty late from Moab to get into Canyonlands, about 45-minute to a 1-hour drive. A few years previous, I'd gone there myself and stayed until the moon rose, because that meant people were leaving, and as a field recordist, that meant a quiet environment to record in. That night in 2020, the moon was bright and there were a few night photographers there that I ended up hanging out with, and it was generally a surreal experience and I felt completely safe. Hoping to have a similar time again with girlfriend along for the ride, and forgetting the fact that maybe the clouds would largely block moonlight that night, I drove us up. It was pretty dark before we even made it 15 minutes along the drive there. Having been there, and more specifically Mesa Rock, twice before, and this being a borderline spiritual place for me, I didn't even think about danger or anything of the sort. Despite that, I had a sixth sense of a gut feeling pretty early on that we really just shouldn't head up there that night. But not wanting to freak myself out, or my girlfriend, I didn't say anything or think much of it, and chalked it up to just being nervous because it was dark. Now, there was a certain vibe along the roads leading up there, and we noticed that there were people leaving the park but no one coming in ahead of or behind us. The instinct to not continue hit me subtly a few more times, and I kept pushing it away like an idiot, I guess, but I've been very familiar with these instincts over the past years and they've served me well, as far as I can tell anyway. I think I genuinely thought that I was just scared because it was dark at this point. But we ended up at the Mesa Park parking lot where 2 cars were packing up and heading out. When they left, it was almost completely dark with the only faintest glow of the moon through the clouds, and not a person around anywhere near us. Canyonlands is pretty remote. We got our backpacks on though, grab a couple of things, and my girlfriend makes sure that I've got my CCW. She doesn't usually care much, so this struck me as an indication that she was maybe concerned too. In any case, we started heading up. It's a pretty short trail, maybe a quarter of a mile. All we wanted to do really was get to this little bowl-like area, the main destination, and hang out and record some sounds. The area is pretty open, with trees both live and dead scattered around, bushes and small cacti and rocky slopes that can be climbed in a few seconds if you really want to. It's a pretty dope scene in the daytime, and I've never really felt uneasy here previously. We'd been doing a bit of travel vlog so far, so I just continued doing that. But I genuinely get goosebumps and chills every single time that I think about this part. It was the weirdest feeling that I'd ever felt. I felt, I don't know, like instinctual, I should get out of here, I'm being watched, etc. I've had those type of feelings before and have several stories to tell from those, but I've never felt what I felt while vlogging like this. This might not seem relevant too, but for context, the field recording that I do is largely of gathering wood and rock sounds. Canyonlands has Navajo sandstone and juniper wood, both of which sound wonderful when tumbled and rolled around. I think of field recording as an art, yes, but also as a way to appreciate a land in a closer way, at least for me, than just taking pictures of it. Personally, I feel like I'm capturing the essence of a location in a very respectful way. Anyway, as I'm vlogging, I felt something that I can only describe as a need to show that I was there peacefully and with respectful intent. I didn't hear anything or see anything that would indicate that I needed to show that I was here on peaceful business, but I just felt it so strongly. Again, I didn't want to scare off my girlfriend, so I didn't say this. I figured that I was just feeling on edge being in near complete darkness again. We could barely see our own feet on the easy open trail at this point. We kept our lamps off to let our eyes adjust to the glow, but I turned mine on to read a plaque at one point. My girlfriend mentioned that I should probably turn it off so I don't create shadows and freak us out, so I turned it back off quickly. I also felt like I was spotlighting myself by having it on anyway, and I was about to turn it back off anyway before she said that. We continued, and the uneasiness just grew and grew. This lasted until we both reached the same exact spot on the trail and stopped at the same time, in silence. "I think we should head back," my girlfriend said, and I agreed. Never have I felt a stronger feeling of being unwelcome in a place. It felt like we just hit a barrier. Not only did I feel unwelcome, but it was more particularly the feeling of intruding on a congregation or a meeting or a gathering that we were not invited to. I don't know how to describe this feeling at all, besides that it was not a conscious thought. It was just there, as these kinds of instincts tend to be. At this point, I realized that I'd been ignoring these feelings long enough, and it was most certainly time to go. I have no idea what was going on in that little bowl that we were about to reach, but I didn't want to find out. We made our way quickly back to the car, and as soon as we got back, we hear a large pack of coyotes quite nearby, but in the opposite direction that we'd been heading on the trail. If we would have continued on that trail, it was not coyotes that we would have run into. But still, this felt like an additional cue to leave, and my girlfriend said, "That's our cue." I badly wanted to record their yips, but common sense took over and we just got the heck out of there. The road, completely devoid of any sign of other people now, was particularly eerie. Driving back wasn't just trying to get back to our campsite in Moab. It almost felt like we were escaping, like when you turn off the lights and you run up the stairs kind of vibe. Now relatively safe in our car, we discussed what had just happened. And every single unspoken, strong gut feeling that I had had, my girlfriend had felt too. The exact same things at the same times. Both felt the need to show something or someone that we meant no harm by vlogging and being chill outwardly. Both felt multiple times on the drive there and on the trail that we shouldn't go. Both felt at the same times that we were like actors on a stage being watched by a multitude of something. Both felt unwelcome, like we were crashing a party. Both felt like we needed to go at the same exact point on the trail. And none of these were spoken aloud to each other at any point until we were back on the road and getting the heck out of there. But as we drove, the moon became visible for a bit. I'm not familiar with moon stuff, but it had been a full moon a few days before, and that night it was large, not full though, and red. This was because of the red sand in the air from the windy day that we'd had, I think, but my girlfriend said that also meant bad juju apparently. Looking into the history of the region and even stories of strange happenings at this place, I am sure that we avoided something strange and or dangerous that night. So I'm a 22-year-old female, and for some context, I live in the countryside of France. My village is settled at the top of a hill and surrounded by forests and crops with no stores or bakery or anything. My parents' house is near two farms, and behind the garden there are large crops there. So, the bathroom's windows overlook the garden, and before my parents built a veranda, there were curtains, so every time that I closed it was when I was going to the bathroom, which made my family laugh. "Why are you closing it? No one is watching you." I was like, "We don't know that, it's just in case." Then the veranda was built, and my dad got rid of the curtains and he put strips on the window. I got worried because I love to know that I have my own privacy when going to the bathroom, like anyone, right? And I even showed my parents that when we are standing at the end of the garden that you can see other people in the bathroom. Of course they laughed and said, "You're just being paranoid," but weeks passed and then I noticed a tractor that was parked just at the end of the garden. Every night the tractor was here. My parents also noticed it and thought that it was a bit weird. We've lived there for like 20 years and it's never really happened before. Sometimes we felt like we were being watched, but we shrugged it off, thinking that we were just being paranoid. My dad came to talk to the farmer to get rid of the tractor, and then it disappeared for a while. Today, though, I was smoking outside, and my mum came to me and told me, "I think you're right, we are being watched. Yesterday night I was going to the bathroom, and the tractor was parked in front of the garden with its headlights illuminating the bathroom's window. I turned the light off and went to the veranda and took a picture, and then he left. I am glad that I was right, but I'm also worried because I don't know how long he or she has been stalking us in the bathroom like that. What are their intentions with just sitting there? Why do they come there like every single night? What are your thoughts about it, and what do you think we should do?" I've been living in my house now for a little over 3 months. From the day that me and my husband moved in, I would always see a black shadow out of the corner of my eye. I was 7 months pregnant when we moved in, and I was super eager to set up the nursery. Well, as soon as the crib and everything was in the nursery, I would always see the black figure entering the nursery. I always thought to myself that black shadows are mostly never a good entity, right? So I just tried to ignore it, and always acted like I didn't see anything. My husband is also not the type of person who believes in the paranormal, so I just always kept things to myself. And things didn't get bad until I gave birth to my son. Now, whatever it is, it mimics his cries, and my husband, who never believed in the first place, is also starting to hear it too. We both just ignore it, but we always share a bit of a look, I guess. But tonight was the first time where I just couldn't ignore it. I've been struggling with postpartum depression, and I decided to just take a bit of a nice relaxing shower while my husband and son were both asleep. However, the whole time that I was in the shower, I felt like eyes were on me. When I got out, I felt better and decided to wash some bottles. And as I'm washing some bottles, I felt something behind me touch my back. I just assumed it was my husband, but then I saw something black on the ground crawling towards me. I immediately jumped back, and when I did, I blinked and it was gone. I ran into our bedroom and woke my husband up, freaking out. He told me that it was probably just from my lack of sleep and to go to bed. But I know what I saw, and now I'm definitely not sleeping tonight. I've always been super creeped out by this experience, and I've thought a long time about sharing it, but it really wasn't until I told one of my friends this story that they pointed out that this might be a Men in Black type of story. Anyways, here it goes. So, it was my middle brother's 10th birthday party, so this was 2006, and I pretty much grew up in the woods as my backyard was a creek park, which is also where Blair Witch supposedly took place, but I digress. My brother's birthday party was a pirate-themed one, and I guess my mum had given us chocolate coins for treasure, I think. I don't really remember why, but all the boys at the party, myself and my mum, walked through the woods before having cake. My youngest brother, Jesse, 6 at the time, told me when we got back to the house that he left his coins by the bridge in the woods. At that part of the woods, there was a fork that was in the path. Left was the bridge leading to a walking trail, and right was deeper on the path ahead, near the creek. So I decided that I would go and find his coins and told him to come with me. Oddly enough, my mum warned us not to go, but we still did, and she let us for whatever reason. Again, this was a long time ago, so I don't remember all of the details. The bridge was about a 5-minute walk from the bottom of our hill that was our backyard. We walked into the woods and everything was normal, just like it was moments ago when we were there with the group. We finally made it to the bridge and I found Jesse's coins right away. I was bent down and Jesse was behind me, and I look up while grabbing the coin, and all of a sudden there's a man in all white with a white brim hat just standing there. At first I thought it was a cowboy hat, and then a man behind him wearing all white too, but had no hat, was standing there as well. They seemed to appear out of nowhere, and I started backing up right away when I saw the first man because, for whatever reason, I just felt pure fear. He saw me scared and backing off, and he said, "I don't bite." That's when I told Jesse to run, and I was screaming run, and we just ran home. I didn't even check to see if they were following us, but we ran all the way out of the woods and up the hill screaming because the group, plus my mum, were on the back deck, and I knew if the men knew people were listening for us, maybe they wouldn't chase us. We told the boys and my mum what happened, and my mum said, "See, I told you so," and that was it. It was absolutely terrifying though, and they truly just came out of nowhere, like they just materialized in front of us. My brother remembers this as vividly as I do, and we just remember both of them looked really strange. Like they were completely white, like paper white. I'm wondering too if anyone has encountered men in all white in the woods like this. I never really knew what this all meant, but it was just so creepy and weird, and this is probably the best place to share something like this, so I thought that I would tell my story here. If you have any idea as to what any of this means, then please do let me know, as all these years later and I still can't stop thinking about it. Two days ago, I was with my friends, their names are Callie and Xander, and we were at my grandparents' house while they were out of town because I'm the caretaker for the house when they're gone, and my friend wanted to hang out for a little bit, so after I finished all my chores, I decided that I wanted to take them out to my old hideout in the woods. I do remember telling them that the woods were actually off limits and that if my uncle caught us, that I'd be in big trouble. Xander was a little bit more hesitant, but ended up going with me and Callie. I just want to clarify too that they both agreed to go and I didn't force them. Anyway, like a group of stupid teens in a horror movie, we all walk to the woods looking to just have some fun and mess around a bit. I get to the opening in the woods and I tell them that it's going to be a very big climb. Callie pulls out her phone and starts recording. Xander sounds a little scared and says that he's not good with climbing, but Callie ends up convincing him to go anyway. After Xander agrees, Callie screams "bring it on" in a sort of joking way, before entering the woods with Xander and I. Now, we get about halfway to the hideout when Xander stops and says that he has a bad feeling. I tell him that it's probably nothing and that we should just continue walking. A few minutes later, and we're at my old hideout, and Callie started being all loud and obnoxious. I reminded her to be quiet because of my uncle. At some point, though, Xander asks if we can leave now because his back was starting to hurt, so we got up and started walking back. We got out of the woods and started walking back to the house when Xander and Callie started freaking out, saying that they really didn't have a good feeling. I told them that I didn't feel anything, but right as I did, I got a very scary image in my head. It was this thing, and it was about 6'5", black muscular figure with horns crawling on all fours. I tell them this, and Callie ends up saying that she needs to sit down because it felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. And then all of a sudden she just collapsed onto the ground. I look at Xander and I ask him to help me help her up. She was still awake, but sort of really out of it. We start walking with her, and we only get a few steps when she regains complete consciousness, I guess you could say. She looks at us and says, "I'm scared." Right after she says that, we all hear a little kid screaming bloody murder, and without thinking, we all just sprint straight back to the house. We get back to the house, and Xander and I are freaking out, but Callie is oddly calm. We ask her what's wrong, and she won't answer. 5 minutes into trying to see if she's okay, she starts mumbling in what seems like a language that isn't English. And for as long as I've known Callie, I know that the only language that she knows is English. She keeps mumbling though and then starts laughing too. I tell Xander to get Kelly to the car while I run inside to the house to lock all the doors. I get the house all locked down and then I run back to my car. Xander is holding Kelly at this point and I'm trying to find my key. I find it in my pocket eventually and I unlock the car for Xander to get Kelly into it. I hop in as well and crank it while Xander is getting her buckled in and everything. Xander gets in the car and I rush out of there heading to my dad's house to get my sage and stuff because at this point, Xander and I have a feeling that she's not Callie anymore, if you know what I mean. I'm speeding through some back roads to get to my dad's house because I realize the longer that we're in the car, the worse Callie was getting. She was now unresponsive and not reacting to anything that we said to her. We get her to my dad's though and I run inside and get the sage. I told Xander to take her outside though to the backyard so my neighbors wouldn't see us. Xander sits her down and I light the sage and I'm smudging the sage and saying something along the lines of, "This is her body, not yours. You need to leave. I don't welcome you here anymore. You're not allowed to haunt her, my friends, the house, or me." And about 20 minutes later, Callie seems to come back to us. We asked her what happened and she said that she didn't remember anything and that she just felt trapped and then she just blacked out. 6 or 7 minutes later, my dad called me and told me that he had just left for work and that he was going to pick up some food. I told him that I had friends over and he offered to get them some food too. At this point, we'd all calmed down, but we tell him what we want, we eat and laugh like nothing happened. But unfortunately, it didn't end here. The next day, my friend Xander didn't come to school. I texted him asking if he was okay, and this is what he said to me. "Yeah, I'm fine. Something happened last night, and it made me stay up until 3 a.m., so my mum let me stay home." And then hours later, he followed up with, "I think a spirit attached to me, like an evil one." And Callie texted me saying something felt very wrong at her house too. She sent me a video as well, and it was her walking into her room and the blinds were moving. Stuff was knocked off the shelves and she was just freaking out because none of her family were home. She was alone hours after we got out of school that day too. And to be honest, I don't like the feeling that I get sleeping at my dad's place anymore. Not to mention that I also have guinea pigs and they've been acting really weird since this happened, like they're more aggressive towards me and each other as well. I really don't know what to make of any of this and I need some help understanding it. Before I met my now boyfriend, it was just my daughter and I. At that time, we lived on our own in an apartment complex. She wasn't even 2 years old yet. I have plenty of stories about this complex, but there's one that I'd like to focus on right now. So my daughter came into the imaginary friend stage. At first it was cute, I thought. I would walk into her bedroom and she would be playing with her dolls, talking to herself, her friend, and keeping herself busy while I just did my best to keep the apartment clean and make some food. Slowly over time though, my daughter got freaked out by her bedroom. So much so that she would not step foot into her room, even for her toys. There was a week period that we didn't enter her room, in fact. She still had toys in the living room to play with, slept in my room, and I had done laundry previously and she wore those clothes instead. In the end, we had to call her father over to ease her fears. My own dad even came over a handful of times too to help out. But this started the check under the bed for monsters and in the closet too theme. After a while, she started to sleep in her room again. She could no longer sleep with her door closed though, light off or without noise. I put a small TV in her room for her to watch her Barbie movies at night to help her sleep. Still though, she would end up in my room in the middle of the night. She had nightmares often too when she didn't like to sleep. One day I'm sitting and writing out a grocery list to go shopping, and I could hear a little girl giggling, but our window was open, so I dismissed it. My daughter then came up to me asking if I wanted her purple Hugs barrel juice. I said no thank you, sweetie. She asked why not, and I said that purple just isn't the color that I like. It's all yours. She asked what color I did like, and I said that I liked the blue one. She went over to the pantry to get a juice, and she started talking. I was sort of half listening when she loudly said, "My mum likes blue, not bleach," and came out shaking her head looking really angry. I asked her what she said, and her face sort of fell. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "I don't know," and then just ran off to play. I went into my pantry, half knowing what I would see, but on the top shelf in the back where my daughter couldn't see was a gallon of bleach that I was going to use to make a tie-dye shirt. I bought it over a month ago, and I have no idea how she knew that it was up there. For some context, when the house was sold to my boyfriend, they couldn't technically label this room as a bedroom. It has to have a closet and some other qualifications apparently, but the elderly woman who lived there made it her bedroom. This room was a sort of dirty beige tan color and concrete flooring. Her clothes and knickknacks sat on what looked like built-in wooden shelves. There were 3 perfectly usable rooms upstairs that she could have used. Not to mention the laundry is also upstairs, so why she put her bedroom in the basement in a room I would consider a storage room, I have no idea. There's no ceiling in this room too, and the only window is this tiny little rectangle window, maybe 2.5 to 3 feet wide and a foot tall. But in any case, the woman passed, I believe, inside this house. Right before my boyfriend bought it, the son of the lady who passed suddenly died too. I don't know how, but it was just eerie at the time, I think. Anyway, as we were moving my stuff in, we needed a large tote kept in that room downstairs, so I ran down to get it. My son wasn't born yet at this stage, and my daughter was at school, so it was only my boyfriend and myself. He's upstairs organizing something. I enter the room and it's pitch black. We had changed the light bulb before, and no light bulbs lasted long in this room. I left my phone upstairs and needed light, so I crossed the room knowing the window was at the very back. It was a creepy pitch black room, and I went straight into the back. The dark has always creeped me out, so I opened the curtain, and there was a sort of foam board covering this window, and as soon as I noticed this, the door slammed shut. I was startled and I let out a scream. There were random items in the room that we stuck in there to get them out of the way, like the old front door welcome mat, a workout machine I think, and totes and random odds and ends. So I made my way to the door around these objects as quickly as I could, because the dark freaked me out, and that room gave me the jeebies anyways. I found the doorknob, and the door felt like it was being held shut. I couldn't open it no matter how hard I tried, and I kept trying over and over again. Panic was setting in, and I started screaming to let me out. I thought my boyfriend was playing a mean prank on me, which wasn't like him, and I believed that until I heard his footsteps frantically storming down the stairs. He was telling me to let go of the doorknob, which I did. He told me to stand back, so I stood in the middle of the room as he kicked and kicked at the door, but it just wasn't budging. I was crying now, and he could hear that it was not a normal quiet sob. I mean, I was in full panic mode at this point. He got the door broken down eventually because the frame to the door broke. I ran out and he caught me, asking what the heck just happened. I explained everything to him. We went upstairs immediately, and I told him that I never wanted to step foot in that room ever again. We believe that the lady may have passed down there. I didn't get many details of her passing myself, so what I know is what I've just been told from others. This same room has also given others the creeps with no context given beforehand. I brought both of my older sisters down to see the basement, but we had redone the floors and painted the walls at this point, and they both gravitated towards the room, and they even witnessed the door closing on its own too. Both have different levels of beliefs in the paranormal. My oldest sister is a hopeful skeptic. I believe she thinks it's super interesting, but actually believing is another thing in and of itself. And my other sister is more of a believer. We play a game called Murder in the Dark. Imagine Among Us without lights. We had about 6 friends over, so 8 of us all together to play, and 3 of us happened to end up in the bedroom downstairs. After a few games, we discussed where we hid, why, and who we thought that we ran into, just sort of post-game talk. And all of my friends mentioned that they honestly believed that somebody else was in the room with them when they entered that bedroom. Another thought that they felt a cat rub up against their ankles, but we had our cat upstairs at this point. My cat is actually very vocal, and for the first game, he actually found me and gave up my hiding spot as well. But that room has the center of a lot of bizarre things. And I mean, sure, the house could be settling weird and explain the door, I guess. The electrical could be bad in that room and explain the light, but I haven't ever seen the door close on its own before or after that event ever again. And ever since my boyfriend started to renovate that room for an office, the light bulbs have lasted months now instead of a couple of days. But if you stay in that basement for long enough, trust me, you begin feeling stared at from one of the corners inevitably. I really cannot explain that, and I don't know what to think of it. I would like to begin by saying that I do believe in spirits or something beyond our comprehension exists, but my knowledge about them and our present situation is extremely poor. For possible interpretations, our home is an ancestral colonial estate within South Africa, dating back to the 19th century. There is a family mausoleum on the outskirts of the property and a somewhat large burial site for the household's workers, roughly 100 meters away from the house, and family members, friends, and some visitors have all had strange experiences in the grounds. Throughout the majority of my life, I have experienced strange things in the house, scratching from within the walls, doors slamming at night, the dogs barking at random and at nothing seemingly, footsteps, just general stuff that is scary but is also easily discarded with reason. I've always soothed myself back into calm by attributing it to be the house being old. However, the past 2 months have been nothing short of a nightmare. I feel like I'm living in a real horror movie. So, what leads me to sharing this is what was set in motion by an eerie anomaly followed by an extremely unnerving discovery. Last night, in the early hours of this morning, around 1 a.m., I was kept awake by very loud scratching, footsteps, and thumping outside of my bedroom door. Initially, I had thought that this was the dog and just let it be. A few minutes later, though, I heard my door handle being turned. It was being turned repeatedly, though, like over and over again, but the door wasn't being pushed open, nor was there any movement from the door itself. Thinking that we were being home invaded, I got my handgun and started screaming, but the door handle was still being turned. My brother and parents ran to my room. No one was outside of my door, nor was anyone found inside of the house. Neither was there any breach into the home or anything, and after searching, my parents told me that it was just a nightmare, and so, in the end, I just equated it to that. But cut forward to this morning, and my brother got up to go to work, so I went back to my room. Before opening the door, I had this indescribable feeling in my gut, though, and my body just felt suddenly cold. I went in to find my sheets sprawled out on the sofa and floor, far on the other side of the bedroom. My crucifix, which is mounted on my side of the bedroom door, was crooked with one of the nails popped out of the door and the other slightly pushed out of the wood. It was nailed in though, and I mean, it cannot physically be turned like that, and the nails just would have needed tools to be pulled out, so I have no idea how that happened. A portrait of my oppa next to my bed was very unnaturally crooked too, which was odd. But I immediately felt, and I know this sounds strange and crazy, but that something very sinister is going on and that something malevolent, no idea what, was suddenly watching me. I got my brother and he was equally distressed about it, so we got our parents. My dad thought that someone was still in the house, but my brother and dad searched the house to no avail. And again, nothing was amiss with security systems, the doors, the windows, or anything. I went back into my room and saw what we all think is blood above one of the mirrors. The mirrors are those sort of sliding mirrors with closets built into the home, and the height of the blood is very high on it. It was like 3 streaks of blood going down as if it was sort of wiped there or something. I stupidly touched it and smeared it, so the lines aren't as concise anymore, but that is proof that whatever this was, it is still wet, which means that it occurred very recently. You can sort of see too that it hasn't dripped down from anything, and it looks like it had just been placed there by fingers maybe. It's extremely difficult to reach without a chair though, so I don't know why an intruder would leave that there or willingly do that. This was not here prior as well, and the blood is in a sort of strange position that has been smeared weirdly. When my dad went to take a look, I could see that he was visibly frightened, which I'd never really seen before, and he's a pretty stoic guy. He's a strong man as well, which has furthered my belief that this is something evil. My parents called the police, and they're on the drive up here at this point. They're still discussing it and being very secretive about it. However, they just cannot comprehend or figure out what happened, and who or what did this. They don't believe in ghosts, entities, or anything spiritual, but I'll definitely be pushing them into getting the house blessed by our priest immediately. Since we were little, my brother and I have always felt like someone was in our rooms when we slept. We both feel like something is there, and there's a very sort of thick, weird feeling or energy which I find hard to describe or attribute to anything, but it is somewhat similar to, I guess, dread or maybe angst is the better word. It has intensified greatly in the last few months, with both of us experiencing more physical anomalies. We've both experienced being touched, scratched, usually on my back, but I had one which drew blood across my breast as well, and I've had my hair pulled a few times. Some family members have experienced it when visiting, and my aunt especially doesn't like staying with us, because she had similar experiences in her youth as well. My dad doesn't elaborate on it and discards it as nonsense, as she is more of the spiritual type, unlike my dad. I thought a lot of the physicality felt down to scratching itches in my sleep or getting my hair caught on things, but the more my brother and I discussed it, we believe that something is amiss and is just very, very wrong. Just to note as well, no one has broken in, nor are there any ways to access the house besides 4 very thick wooden doors, which are always deadbolted at night time. I don't have any mental health issues either, and this is not dreamt or some product of a hallucination, as we have both experienced things that we've never really discussed with each other before, and suddenly we were just like, hey, that's happened to me as well. But we are desperately looking for help or advice and an explanation as to my family's current predicament, so if you've got anything to add, any advice or really any comment, please do share it because I'm pretty frightened. Ever since we moved into our new house, which is actually quite old, that my father bought, and I was in the 4th grade at this point, it started almost immediately. When I went to sleep, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I heard my father snoring in his room and my sister turning in her bed with metal bed frames in her room. The footsteps, though, they always stopped right outside of my doorway. Then things started happening in the daytime. I was alone with our family dog in our house a lot, and I was always scared, and so was our dog. but I heard strange banging noises in different rooms, and our dog would go crazy when he heard it. It got worse though, and I got more scared as it got worse as well. During days, I would yell in our house that this was my home and whoever it was needed to leave. But during the night, whatever this entity was, it got closer every night. It didn't stop anymore in front of my doorway. It started to step into my room, then step in front of my bed. Then I felt it sit on my bed. The final day I was home alone again with our dog, I was shaking in the living room couch with a knife, our dog right beside me growling and staring at the hallway. Then I heard this really loud bang like a cabinet fell over or something. Our dog went absolutely crazy, and I took the kitchen knife and went screaming down the hallway how I wasn't afraid, and when I got there, nothing had fallen. That night I was like glued to the wall in my bed as well. I was panicking when I heard footsteps. They got closer and closer like they always did. I was shaking and had trouble breathing, and this thing sat on my bed next to me, but then it sort of crouched over, it seemed, and I felt hot breathing on my neck. My eyes were closed and I thought that this was it. I was about to die, when suddenly it said my name, gently and sort of hushingly. I let out the biggest scream ever and jumped up and ran straight to my sister's room, hysterically crying. She woke up and asked what had happened, and I just cried and stuttered that the man said my name. She asked what man, and I screamed, the man that comes to my room every night. After that, some days later, my dad actually hit me and I moved in with my mother. I lived there for a few years and moved back to my dad at some point. My sister was living on her own now. I moved into my sister's old room. Even though I was now 14, I was too scared to sleep in my old bedroom. I slept with my door closed, but still, every night I heard the same dreadful footsteps in the hallway. A few months went by and I was at my sister's place visiting. Old stuff was brought up at one point, and my sister asked me did I remember the man that I told her when I was 10. I said that I never forgot and asked why she asked me. And she told me that on that night when I ran to her room crying and told her sobbing about the man, apparently she acted brave for me, but when I told her, her blood ran cold. She told me that every night she had heard the same footsteps for months, and apparently she just thought that it was me. When I moved to my mum's apartment, she heard every night those footsteps as well, wandering through the hallway, and that's when she realized that it wasn't me too. I lived in the house just me and my father for about 4 years. Every time I was alone, didn't matter if it was day or night, I heard it walk around the house. And sometimes when I sat on the couch watching a movie, my father's door would open behind me and it walked from the room to stand right behind my back. Sometimes it would put its hand on my shoulder, I think, because I would sort of feel it standing behind me and then feel this warm sort of tickling sensation on my shoulder at a shape of a palm. Weirdly though, the man just never seemed to come to my sister's old room. It would stand in front of the doorway, but it would never seemingly step into that room. It was like the only room in the whole house that seemed to be out of its reach for some reason. But the man had done something to everyone who had come to our house by this point. Middle of the day, it touched my grandma's shoulder. It would yank everyone's feet who had fallen asleep on the couch. It would hit walls or just wander around the house. I found it kind of amusing that people who didn't believe in ghosts would always be absolutely terrified out of their mind, and started to believe after spending some time in this house. Before I moved back to my mum's place at 16 years old, I guess I wasn't really scared of it anymore. It didn't hurt me or anything like that, and who knows, maybe it was just checking up on me that I was alright when I was a kid or something. I'm 20 years old now and live in a different city. My dad lives in the house by himself now, but every time that I visit him, I just know that that man is still there. If there would be a way to get him from my father's home to my place, honestly, I think I might even do it at this point. As weird as it seems, I guess I just kind of grew fond of it, and I kind of miss having it around. My girlfriend and I were graduate students, living together in a 6-unit apartment building with an outside stairwell. It was an older Victorian home that had been converted into apartments. The whole street was lined with similar buildings. It was off campus, but conveniently located within walking distance of bars, a coffee shop, and several restaurants. The neighborhood had laid-back bohemian sort of vibes. The tenants were a mixture of college kids, young professionals, and families. The area was generally safe, but it wasn't too far from a rougher section of town. So it was a Thursday night, and being the night owl that I am, it was post 3 a.m. I had just finished a movie. I turned the TV off and went to the stairwell for a quick smoke before bed. We were in the middle of a snowstorm at this point, so the ground was covered in 6 inches of fresh powder, and it was freezing. I quickly smoked my cigarette and rushed back inside. My girlfriend was always complaining about me forgetting to lock the door, and as was my habit, I left the door unlocked. I jumped into bed though, and just as I was falling asleep, I thought that I heard a noise. I brushed it off at first, but then I heard a creak. Probably just the wind, I concluded. Moments later, I heard the floorboards creaking. Now I was listening intently. My girlfriend felt me shuffling and asked what was wrong. I told her that I thought that I heard something. And then we both heard what sounded like someone stumbling onto our couch. We shot up and I yelled, "Is someone there?" No answer. The floor creaked again. This time in unison we shouted, "Who's there?" Another noise. I quietly stood up and scanned the room for something that could be used as a weapon, but there was nothing. Growing up, my dad always kept a baseball bat under his bed, and I regretted not adopting this practice. We yelled again, but there was no response. Again, but this time from the darkness, we were greeted by a low-pitched, incomprehensible growl. I wondered if one of my buddies was playing a prank on me. That seemed out of character for my friends, especially at this hour on a weekday night and during a snowstorm. What I really thought was that a crackhead had wandered in. My girlfriend yelled, "Who's out there?" More footsteps. The intruder was still in the family room, but he was getting closer to our bedroom now. We heard the growl again, but this time it was followed by a gurgle, and "It's Matt." We didn't know any Matts, at least not any that would enter an apartment uninvited in the middle of the night. I looked at my girlfriend, and I had never seen someone so scared. If worst came to worst, I thought to myself, well, I know I can outrun her. I hoped it didn't come to that. "Matt who?" we shouted repeatedly. After a long pause, he finally said, "Matt, I'm friends with Mike and Kelly." Relief washed over us. Mike and Kelly were our neighbors. I turned on the lights and walked into the family room, and there he stood, a 6'2", slovenly-looking college kid. Matt was blacked out, drunk. Our neighbors had hosted a pre-game party at their apartment apparently, followed by a trip to the nearby bars. They had abandoned Matt, and despite the storm, he had found his way back to their apartments. Their door was locked and his phone calls had gone unanswered. His evolutionary drive to survive had kicked in, and he had sought warmth in the first unlocked apartment that he could find. I told him that he scared us and that he had to go. He stepped outside and I quickly locked the door behind him. The next day, though, I learned that Matt had, unfortunately, frozen to death. He'd been discovered by another neighbor, huddled next to her car under the lean-to garage. My father lived with us for a while, 6 months prior to passing away, in fact. Long story short, my father was a drug addict who became violent and had to be forced from our home. This led to us not speaking to him for the last few months of his life. He didn't pass away peacefully. Since his death, my family has experienced 3 more losses. Our home has become a place of constant sadness and negative energy. The last few months, we've been experiencing some strange happenings too. So, my father installed our ceiling fan, and it had always turned itself on sporadically. After his passing, it started happening at least once a day, turning on full blast, in conjunction with the TV turning on as well. My father put a small screw in the back of the remote to keep the battery cover on. I would set the remote down on the table, turn my back, and then the TV and the fan would turn on. Sometimes it would take me turning the TV off several times for it to stay off as well. This stopped happening after my mum cancelled cable and returned the remote to the provider. The ceiling fan also went back to only turning on sometimes, and I know that this could easily be explained as electrical or wiring issues, but I just bring it up because maybe it's related. In any case, we have my father's ashes on top of the china cabinet, and we had some photos of him around it. The photos kept falling off with no explanation. My mum took the photos down after a framed picture of her and him fell and shattered, ruining the photo. He found the photo in storage shortly before he was removed from our home, in fact. When my partner and I are home alone, we've also both heard cabinet drawers slamming. The front and the back doors sometimes slam as well, and what sounds like a drawer opening and being rummaged through, then slams shut as well. Chairs can be heard being pushed in and out, but when investigated, nobody is ever there. The cats and the dog will be asleep in another room or where we're in our sight, and several times when I've showered while home alone, I'll hear voices in the house, and they seem to react to this. I keep seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye too, and the other day I briefly saw a brown outline of a person in my kitchen. This didn't happen prior to my father's passing, mind you, which is why I give all this context. But yesterday was my aunt's funeral. She passed young and suddenly. We have all taken it kind of hard, I guess, but last night my partner and I were sitting on the back porch for a few hours just talking, and as I was mid-sentence, we suddenly heard footsteps and what sounded like a loud growling sound that was getting closer. We both immediately got up and ran inside because we felt this primordial sense that I was in danger. It made my heart beat fast and my hair stand up on the back of my neck. I didn't see anything after looking around 10 minutes later. The growl also sounded like it came from a human. But the yard is fenced in, and the gate on the side of the yard, the noise that comes from it when you unlock it, it's pretty much impossible to miss. And the other gate was in view of us, so if someone had jumped the fence, we would have heard it. We were outside for 2 hours, and my dog had been out with us as well. If a person had been out there, then she would have ran up to them for sure as well. If it had been an animal, she would have been trying to run at it or alert us to it for sure. She's a hunting breed and has done so before. But we talked to my mum, and she's had a similar experience in the yard as well. We can't figure out what it could be, can't think of a plausible explanation, but something tells me that all of this is somehow related. This happened around 2018, right after my sister and I moved out of our apartment together. It's been bothering me since I just moved out. I was home alone on my day off when someone knocked on my door. No one ever visits, and I have anxiety, so that was terrifying to my brain already. But I answered, and it was a woman who lived in one of the basement apartments. She seemed nice at first, asking if I wanted my clothes that she was giving away because they weren't her style but supposedly matched mine perfectly as a young woman. That was already a bit of a red flag in my mind, because the only time that I ever saw her was when I was walking to work, wearing my uniform of a black shirt, black pants, and black hat. But I let her talk because, well, I'm super awkward and hated being rude to technical strangers. Then she started getting pushy and listing off super expensive name brands to try to get me to go to her apartment. It's an old small building, no cameras, and I lived on the second and top floor. which would be down what I called the creepy stairs and next to the door to the back lot that nobody used. When I realized that she was holding a notebook open with a script of what to say, I continued to reject, but my anxiety wouldn't let me close the door on her face without fear of her lashing out. She kept insisting until I finally told her that my boyfriend was going to be home soon and suggested that she donated them. My boyfriend wasn't going to be home for many, many hours, but she didn't need to know that, obviously. She leaves and I go back to my room, which has a window facing that back lot or alley. A few moments later, I hear a fight happening in the lot and see her with the previous, he was already fired at that point, maintenance man. It's a loud, screaming fight, and they're standing next to his truck, which has tinted windows and a covered truck bed. My paranoia went a little wild, so I texted my family about it, just to feel a bit safer. Then I believe that he left, but a little while later, something hits my door hard. I didn't check, just sort of stared. Then it happened again and again, all night until my boyfriend came home, and for a few days when I was alone. I found out after looking at the door that they were hitting my deadbolt, and it was off center. Even after it was replaced, the damage just couldn't be fixed. It stopped after a little while, and the woman moved out almost immediately after all of that. I don't want to feed my paranoia, but something obviously just wasn't right. I know that I should have called the police, but I have horrific phone anxiety. Everyone thought that I was overreacting too, and police in my town are relatively useless anyway. Also, that maintenance man was rehired and was the one who replaced my deadbolt, insisting that he kept the extra key, despite never needing the old. Thankfully, my new house is much safer. The bedroom that I used to have for most of my life, living with my parents, has had quite an extensive lot of bizarre or unexplained happenings. The most puzzling, though, is that it seems to be causing sleep paralysis in whoever sleeps there. Note that all smoke or gas detectors of the house have always been functional. The house has no gas line or indoor garage, doesn't have mold or other toxic things or hallucinogens. I and anyone else mentioned here have no history of mental illness or other health conditions, anything susceptible of causing such things as well. None of us take any medication with no such side effects, don't use any drugs, and was not at any point under the influence of alcohol or other substances. In other words, I have racked my brain over everything that could have been causing this, and there just really isn't anything that can explain it. Anyways, I first noticed the phenomenon when I was a young teen. It didn't happen very often at first, but as I grew older, it happened more often, up to every other night. I would wake up, usually at night or early morning, fully unable to move. I couldn't talk, couldn't move my eyes even, and the harder that I tried to move, the more it felt like my body was, like vibrating or buzzing, with proportionally louder rumbling noise in my ears. I have tinnitus, and this definitely wasn't that. For the longest time, I wouldn't fight it and just let myself fall back to sleep. I learned about sleep paralysis when I was about 17 or 18 because of this, and it seemed like a good enough scientific explanation for me. That was until I moved to another bedroom inside the same house. You see, at age 21, we decided to move my bed to my father's previous bedroom in the basement, and I instantly stopped having those sleep paralysis episodes. I think that that's when I realized that these weren't as normal as I thought that they were. I mean, if I did suffer from the condition, it wouldn't matter where I slept, wouldn't it? In fact, I never had one single episode anywhere other than that one in that specific bedroom. Not once in any other room in the same house even. Not once in any other room that I've had since moving out, in any of my previous apartments, nor in my current house. It's been almost 15 years since, and Yet, to this day, if I happen to try and take a nap in that specific bedroom when I'm visiting my parents, half of the time it will cause sleep paralysis. It also doesn't matter what time of day or night it is. I've even had it happen in broad daylight just last week. And it's gotten worse too. I don't even need to be near sleep. Sometimes all it takes is for me to just close my eyes and the paralysis hits instantly, but always only in that one specific room and nowhere else. My mum now sleeps in that room. I've told her several times about these experiences and she always avoids the subject. I also told my significant other. He decided too that he would like to try and take a nap in that room out of curiosity. He has never had a single episode of sleep paralysis in his entire life, mind you, and did not even know it existed until I told him about it. But a few weeks ago, he had the opportunity to try it. He said that he felt observed the moment that he stepped into that room, but brushed the feeling off. And yes, he did experience paralysis for the first time ever, right there in that room. He couldn't sleep at all, and it only went away suddenly when I walked past the bedroom door on my way to the bathroom. He shot up and left the room, visibly shaken, and thanked me for passing by, saying that he felt really trapped and couldn't seem to break free. Now, this guy sleeps like a snoring dead log. It takes a lot of noise to wake him up, and me just walking by really shouldn't have been enough. So I know for a fact that he wasn't asleep. He also has taken naps at my parents' house before, though not in that one room, and never had any other issues either. I don't know what it is about that room, but there just seems to be something really off. Back in 2021, my family took a trip to Lake Sanitla in North Carolina, a beautiful lake that's rich in Native American history and surrounded by mountain trails. We decided to go on one of these trails on an overcast day. Now, I am not an athletic person by any means and suffer from asthma, so I was behind the rest of my family by myself. And about almost halfway through the hike, I suddenly heard my sister yell my birth name, but it sounded like it was off the trail. She never calls me by my real name, just my nickname that I've had since I was a baby. But it sounded like she was scared, so I was very tempted to run off and find her, but I knew that my sister wasn't stupid. She wouldn't go off the trail, even in the case of an emergency. I tried to double the pace, and I quickly caught up to the rest of my family, and my sister was there with them, resting on some rocks next to a waterfall, chatting away and taking pictures. I asked my sister if she had called my name, but she didn't know what I was talking about. She had apparently been talking to our dad the whole time. So, I don't know what called my name that day, but I'm sure glad that I didn't listen to it, because honestly, who knows what would have happened to me. I haven't been to that trail since this encounter. I don't have a clue what called my name, but if you're educated in Appalachian folklore, then please do give me some insight on what happened to me. So, this happened today, and I really have no idea what to think about it. I am a 30-year-old single female, live in a small town in Northern California. It's been pretty dreary weather the past couple of days, with scattered light showers after a surprisingly hot weekend last weekend. It's a very rural area. In fact, you have to go to the neighboring town for high school, groceries, etc. But anyways, I was on my way home just to drop off a few things and head out again. My road is connected 2 ways to the main road, almost like a loop, so I have 2 choices on how to get home. As I approach my little road from the main road from one direction, I noticed stuff on the ground just at the turnoff from the main road to my little road. It looked like roadkill, but as I drove over it and stopped to see, it was a black cow hoof and a single skinned cow leg, and a large round organ of some sort. I'm assuming a stomach, all scattered close to one another, and looked like they were just plopped there, not hit or dragged by a car, because there was no blood around it or skid marks or anything. It was super weird, but I drove on thinking that, I don't know, maybe someone hit a cow or something. As I'm continuing on down this little road on the way to my driveway, probably a mile, I pass another thing on the road and stop to look closer. It's a whole pile, a large pile of intestines sitting in the road. Again, almost like they were placed there, not dragged or splattered or anything. I keep going and I get to my driveway, then up to my house. I mention what I saw to my husband, and he agrees that it's a bit weird and suggests that I should go the other way out to finish my errands instead of back near the guts and all that stuff on the road. I agree, and I see nothing on the little road in the other direction. Well, my errands take me no more than 40 minutes max, so I decide to take the same route as my original drive to see the stuff on the ground. But when I get there, there's absolutely nothing there at all. And not even a mark where any of the body parts had been. No stains, no remnants, absolutely nothing. Not one piece of anything. Not on the main road, not on the little road. I don't know. So I'm just thinking about all the possibilities, I guess. Someone could have scooped up and disposed of the remains, and also hosed down the road in 40 minutes between when I drove through. It's a very, very rural town though, so this is impressive response time by someone with the means to clean up remains so well like that. Maybe I just hallucinated the stuff on the road, but I have no history of mental illness or anything. Scavengers, maybe they got all the remains, but picked the road completely clean in 40 minutes? Not only just on the main road where the leg and hoof and the stomach were, but also a mile or so down my little semi-private road where the intestines were separately. Maybe the rain washed everything away. It's been barely a drizzle today, and the amount and weight of the remains on the road had to be way too much for a little sprinkle to wash anything away. I don't know. It's been a gloomy, weird day, and this was the cherry on top in terms of weirdness. And I thought that I would share it here because, I don't know, it's just creepy. And I just cannot imagine how they just disappeared like that, with absolutely nothing to suggest that they were ever there. So my first experience with the paranormal was actually a string of experiences. I was 16 and my family had just moved into a new home. I loved the house, I had my own room that I picked myself, and I didn't feel any kind of hesitance while unpacking and decorating to make myself more at home. Everything was pretty great. At least for the first week anyway. After school, I would get home with my little brother about an hour before my mum would. And one day, I was the first one into the home. I threw my bag onto the kitchen table and found my cat stood frozen, staring at a door in the kitchen that led to our garage. I spoke to my cat. "Hey, what are you doing?" I walked towards him, but before I could touch him, a woman's scream came from the garage, and my cat sprinted from the room. And I followed, taking my little brother with me outside and calling my mum. My brother insisted, though, that he didn't hear anything, and my mum suggested that I must have just imagined it. But I knew that it was real. Once my mum got home, we checked the house to find nothing. She suggested that I was stressed and watching too many scary movies. I didn't bother arguing any further. I could tell that I wasn't going to be believed. So I grabbed my bag and walked to my bedroom at the end of the hall. I stood in the doorway and froze in my tracks because my closet door was slit open and hanging from its track, as if someone had tried to pull it off, and my pillow was standing in the middle of the room, a flat, flimsy pillow that I couldn't get to stand even if I wanted it to. I yelled for my mum and I said someone's been in my room. She came back, my little brother trailing behind her. I pointed in the room, only to find the pillow now laying flat, as it should have been the whole time. "Sweetheart, you must have knocked it off the bed when you woke up this morning." She brushed it off, but I knew that I hadn't. And even if I had, how the heck was it standing like that? I played with the pillow for several minutes, trying to mimic the position that it had been in, but there is just no way that it could sit like that. It wasn't possible. I went to bed that night without a problem. While I did think that what had happened earlier that day was strange, I didn't lose sleep over it, but I was prone to waking throughout the night, so, like clockwork, I woke at around 3 in the morning and got up to go to the bathroom. When I returned to the doorway to my bedroom, again, I froze. I could see a figure sitting on the edge of my bed. It had no features, just the shadow of a large man. I leaned forward, squinting my eyes, trying to adjust my vision to the darkness of my room. But before I could move any further, the figure stood and charged at me. I have never screamed so loud. My feet came out from under me and I hit the floor, my hand flipping on the light before I had lost my balance. When I turned around, nothing was there. My mom and my brother were there in an instant, wondering why I was screaming and now crying on the floor. I tried to explain, but "You were dreaming," my mum told me. "I was awake though, I was up," I tried to argue, but she shook her head. "You must have been dreaming," she insisted. "Go back to bed." I didn't sleep well that night, but the next day went fine, until I was back home from school. The house suddenly didn't feel like home to me anymore, and my room did not feel like mine either. I felt like I was invading somebody else's space, and I was apologetic. I attempted to make a Ouija board out of cardboard and a clear bottle cap. I was desperate to confirm my own experiences. I said hello quietly, waiting for a response, but there was nothing. I then said, "Look, I'm sorry if we moved into your home. I'll be a good roommate. I'm very clean." I began to ramble, but the bottle cap never moved. I started to feel silly, looking down at this makeshift board, so I pushed it away and I just climbed into bed. That night, though, I heard something rattling around. I initially thought that it was a large house moth knocking itself into something. I flipped on my bedside lamp and noticed the board on the floor, only the bottle cap was now standing on its side, spinning like a quarter in circles. I let out a breath of air in disbelief and the cap instantly dropped, once again motionless. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the board, tearing it in half and shoving it in the trash. I kept my lamp on for about an hour before I started to feel tired again. Reluctantly, I flipped the lamp back off and I drifted back to sleep. Now at that time, I slept with a blindfold on, irritated by the smallest bit of light. So when I awoke again, feeling the cold air of my fan, I assumed that I had kicked my blanket off in my sleep, and I felt around the bed trying to find it to cover myself again, but no luck. So I lifted my blindfold and was horrified to see my blanket standing tall above me. I moved quickly, attempting to throw my feet to the side and to run to the door, but the blanket fell, and I was forced back to my mattress. A weight began suffocating me as if someone had just laid on top of me. I gasped for breath, trying to scream, but not a sound would escape my throat. I remember my eyelids fluttering as I lost consciousness from the lack of air. That morning, I awoke with my blindfold lifted, my blanket tossed to the side of the bed, and pain taking over my body instantly. And because of these things, I knew that I hadn't imagined it. I came out of my room and I couldn't stop myself from crying when I found my mum getting ready for work in the bathroom. I tried to explain, but she didn't believe me. She never believed me. "You were dreaming," she said to me. "You can stay home from school today. Just try and get some rest." I reluctantly nodded and I went back to bed, still scared to really go back to sleep. I laid stiff and waited for the sound of my mum and my brother leaving for the day. I heard the keys jingle and the doors close. I was alone, now in the home. I rolled onto my stomach and I cried into my pillow. "I'm sorry about your mum," a voice said, clearly beside me. I gasped and sat straight up. There was no one. I couldn't handle being alone there anymore. I got out of bed and I walked myself to school. Thankfully, we moved out of that home shortly after due to my mum getting married, and strangely enough, all the activity instantly stopped, much to my relief. This happened in 2005 in Southern California. We had just been evicted from our house and found ourselves at my nana's house again. I hadn't lived there since I was 4 years old, but here I was, sleeping on the floor of the second story with my mother and 2 brothers. We had left our former house with nothing but clothes and trash bags, and we moved the bags against the wall so that we all had room to sleep. The entire room was bare with no furniture, not even a curtain rod for the windows. So it was just the 4 of us and our trash bags. The second floor had been an attic before they converted it, so it ran the length of the house and was a wide and long room with 2 small storage closets that always gave me the creeps, and a standard closet on one far end of the room. It was dark though, and my brothers were sprawled far from me and my mum on one side of the room and us on the other. I was having trouble sleeping, and I remember that there was a storm with lightning that would light up the room occasionally from the flashing. There was one large window facing the house's west side and one smaller window facing north. As I said, I really couldn't fall asleep that night and felt uneasy, like an energy shift had happened in the room. I had seen things in that house before at that point, but tried my best to chalk it up to my unease to nerves and stress. I scanned the room and made sure it was just us there. Nothing looked off, so I laid back down and closed my eyes again. This was before the cell phones of today, and we were too poor to afford any cell phones anyway, so I really had nothing to distract myself with in the dark, and I still had that strange feeling of something being off. I opened my eyes again and started to stare at the wall in front of me as I lay on my side with my back against the opposite wall, when I began to focus on a black trash bag. It looked more prominent than the others for some reason, sort of off in some way. I remember a flash of lightning lighting up the room and seeing that trash bag that I was focusing on was pitch black, with no sort of glossing effect like the others. I was like, what kind of trash bag is that? No one had a duffel bag. We all grabbed what we could and stuffed them into big, hefty black bags. But all of a sudden, I felt my heart racing as I watched the trash bag move a little bit. Like whatever it was crouching down facing the wall with its back to me and shifting its weight trying to make itself look small. I can only describe it as something cloaked in the blackest material that I had ever seen. I pressed myself as close to my wall as possible and didn't take my eyes off of it. I contemplated screaming and waking everyone up in the room, but then it shifted in its crouched pose again. I did what my nana always said to do when I was scared, and I started to recite the Lord's Prayer in Spanish in my head, just like she had taught me. It then seemed to start to turn its head very slowly, like it knew that I knew it was there. Words cannot describe the side profile of this thing. It had black skin and a nose like those silly 90s Halloween prosthetics, witch sort of nose kids things. They used to have them back in the day anyway. It was long, bent and crooked, and I could see the whites of its eyes bulging in such a hideous, abnormal way as it looked at me from the corner of its eye. I gasped loudly and looked around to shake my mum awake so I wouldn't be alone looking at this thing crouching in the dark. My mum was annoyed, naturally, that I had woken her up, and when I told her that there was something evil against the other wall, she got up angrily and snapped on the overhead light. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the trash bags that we had brought with us. She told me to stop being a baby and to let her get some sleep, so I begged her to leave one of the closet lights on at least, and I practically clung onto her like a giant koala, which is embarrassing as I was 14 at the time, because whatever the heck that I had seen, it had scared me right to the bone. It didn't show itself to me ever again though, and that face, it haunts my nightmares sometimes. For years I told myself that it was just the stress of the move and the overall chaos that my life was in at the time, until my siblings and I, we were reminiscing about our experiences at that house, and as I relayed this story to them, my sister cut me off and said, "You saw that too? Like a witch thing?" My brother chimed in, stating that he had a nearly identical experience but thought that it was a large pile of clothes on the floor when he saw it. My sister allegedly saw that thing crouched as a shadow one night when she lived on the second floor, alone. And when she had left, we moved in shortly after. And she said that she slept with the light on for weeks after her encounter. We all had seen it separately, but described it all the same. Hunched down or crouching with black skin and huge bulging eyes. Think of Jeepers Creepers 2 when he licks the bus window, and a huge long crooked nose. I don't think that it was a witch, I think it was something very negative, that much I know. But something evil is up there, and I think it showed itself to me that night. I lived there for 4 years and I had plenty of awful things happen, but thankfully I didn't see that thing again, and haven't seen it since. And to be honest, I hope that I never do. So this story happened pretty recently, and for some context, me and my friends, we're all teens that like to explore and do stupid stuff, like normal teenagers do, I guess. But one day we found this tunnel that was a drain under a busy road. We had to crouch and sit on our skateboards to explore it, since the height of the tunnel was short. As we're going deeper into this tunnel, it gets really dark, and the flashlights from our phones, they can only reach about 5 feet in front of us. So we're pretty much blind to what we could come across until we're pretty close to it. In the tunnel, I remember the wall was painted in all red and had these sorts of sheets of metal with white handprints connected to cloth pins. We decided to keep on going until we reached what we thought was the dead end, but it was not. On the left was a more square tunnel compared to the rectangle shape that we were in. And in the distance of the connected tunnel, there was a bright light coming from the outside shining from above into a sort of red shopping cart with belongings in it. We slowly inched towards the light where this shopping cart was. The light turned out to be a big hole in the ground that we could crawl out of if we needed an escape. As we were about to pass the shopping cart, my friend who was in the lead was too afraid to go forward anymore. And I mean, it was pitch black 5 feet from where we were. I decided to take the lead and I keep going. I stepped past the shopping cart and stopped. I don't know what it was, but all of a sudden I was afraid. I just had a gut feeling that something was back there. I slowly moved back. I stopped. And I swear that I was seeing something move from deep in the darkness of the tunnel. Before I could put everything together, a loud echo of someone pounding an object on the walls of the tunnel struck me back, causing everybody to freak out and crawl out of the escape hole. We ran, and once we got out, we were approached by a homeless man. He ran to us asking us what we were doing in there. We told him that we didn't mean any harm and that we were just exploring. But he explained to us that there's a man that apparently lives underground in that tunnel, and that, allegedly, he would have killed us if we went any further. The man was apparently crazy and threw a rock at a poor guy's head before, almost killing him. Luckily, nobody was hurt from our group, but even still, it was scary and dangerous. It was fun, I admit, and I'm still glad that I experienced it, but still, it could have taken a turn for the worse. And that thought sits really heavily in my gut. So me and my girlfriend, we went to Eastern State Pen pre-pandemic, and anyone who has been there will tell you that you basically pay to walk around a jail that is falling apart. It stinks, it's gross, and it's kind of dangerous, but the history of it is cool though. Me and my girlfriend decided to forego the tour and just see things on our own. It was cool at first. We walked around and looked through the cells, we ventured into the areas that weren't crumbling. It was pretty fun, and I'd say it was about maybe 4:30 in the afternoon. There weren't a lot of people in there with us. It was still sunny out for July. We went to a certain cell block, and all of a sudden I started to feel really ill. I just stood at the end because I didn't want to move. I felt like something didn't want me in there. She was halfway down the block though, and in one of the cells, talking and laughing. But then, all of a sudden, I watched as this thing came out of a cell, maybe like 40 feet in front of me. It was completely ink black, like a man fully made of black ink. That's the only way that my mind could process it at the time for some reason. I mean, it made no sense, but my brain had almost short-circuited or something. But it looked fully human and solid black. I couldn't see through it, and it had no features or face or anything. I've never been so scared in my life, and I couldn't run, my feet were glued to the floor. The feeling that this thing was giving off, though, was enough to make me sick. I felt this tightness in my chest and this overwhelming feeling of anxiety. I just kept thinking, I shouldn't be here. It doesn't want me here. I shouldn't be here. I remember it so vividly, and I just kept repeating the words in my head. Me and this thing just stood there, face to face, for what must have been at least a solid minute. Then, it just moved into another cell. When it was gone and out of sight, my brain had begun to fully process what I had just seen. My body jerked to life, and I sprinted so quickly out of that cell block. I grabbed my girlfriend, and we left the prison entirely. I still have nightmares about it, just facing off with it like that. The thoughts and the feelings were so intense that it wanted me gone that it's hard to explain. I just didn't belong there. That much I knew. I'm Haitian, and my mum still has her roots in native culture. She said that it was never human to begin with. It was something made out of evil. I'm really not sure because it had a human form though, and I also never usually buy into the cultural myths like that too because I'm an atheist. But this I will never ever forget. And quite honestly, I don't recommend going to Eastern State Pen. Through my life, I've had several experiences that could be considered paranormal, but due to my personality traits, I'm not good at sharing stuff like this. I'm an atheist, and I sort of believe in paranormal events, I guess. I mean, at least they're a possibility in my mind. But for me, the paranormal is something that we can interact with, or it can interact with us for different reasons, and it has been described to me a bit like a receptor for that something that might be there. That being said, here's my experience. So a few years ago, I was living in this old apartment. It was in good shape, but you can easily tell how old it was by just looking at it. During all my time there, I always felt this, I don't know, like bad vibes, I guess. And I had several experiences there. One of them happened during the night. I was sleeping in a king-size bed with my girlfriend. We always slept in the middle of the bed, and as you know, a king bed is quite a wide bed. At some point during the night, I started to wake up, and as I recall, I was in this waking up moment when you can't tell if you're still sleeping or sort of already awake. But I just had this feeling of someone else was in the room with us. And as I was opening my eyes, I felt like I fell out of bed, just harder, like I wasn't pushed from it, but thrown from it. I opened my eyes and found myself about maybe 3 or 4 feet from my bed, and my girlfriend was in a panic, looking at me, asking how the heck I got there and what was that loud sound. Me hitting the floor, apparently. But I look at my arm and it had some kind of mark that you get when something grabs you hard. It was like a hand mark, just way bigger than my own. Putting the marks aside though, to this day I try to think on how I possibly was able to do what I did that night. How I was able to just fling myself out of the bed like that. Like I said, it was a king-size bed, so to be honest, it just seems impossible. And it wasn't like my girlfriend could throw me out of the bed like that. I'm just too big for her to do that. I really don't know what to believe about this, because I just haven't come up with a good explanation yet. Back when I, a female, was in college in Texas, my roommates, one female and two male, and I decided to drive to Boulder, CO, for spring break. To maximize our time in Boulder, we decided to take shifts and drive all the way through, rather than stopping for overnight stays. It was roughly an 18-hour trip, so I'm driving my shift when we reach the Texas Panhandle in the early morning hours. We're out in the middle of nowhere and have not seen a single car in either direction for ages, when we notice headlights behind us. The car came up on us quickly, then followed behind for some time. Oddly, it would get real close to us, then back off real far, then get close again. This pattern continued for several miles. We're in the car nervously joking about it being a potential deliverance situation set in Texas flatland, when suddenly the headlights are joined by red and blue police lights. It was so dark out there that we had not seen the light bar on the hood and had not realized that we were being followed by a cop. I check my speedometer and I'm not speeding, so we're all wondering why we're getting pulled over, but I go ahead and pull to the shoulder. Up comes a cop wearing a cowboy hat to my window. He shines his light in the car and looks us over, then asks me to get out of the car. I hesitate at first, but there are 3 other people in the car, so I'm not feeling particularly unsafe at this point. I grab my wallet, get out, and stand against the driver door. The cop looks at my license and insurance, then tells me that he's going to do a sobriety test. I'm thinking, what? But know that I've had nothing to drink, so I say, okay. The way the cop directed me for the walking in a straight line test had me ending my walk right by his car. When I finished, he reached over to open his back passenger door and then told me to just get in. What? Why? Sit in the car while I look up your license. Now, I had heard how doors on the back of cop cars, they only open from the outside, so I knew that if I got into this car and he closes the door, I will not be able to get out. It's like 3 a.m, pitch black darkness on a road dozens of miles from any civilization, and I am not getting in that car. So, I'm sorry, but with all respect and for my own safety, I do not want to get into the back of your car. What did you say to me? For my own safety and with all due respect, I'm not sitting in the back of your car. You can call for another officer to come out here, but I just don't feel safe getting in your car, okay? Do you realize that I could arrest you right now for not obeying an order from a police officer? Again, sir, I am not meaning to be disrespectful, but I am not getting into your car. We go back and forth like this for several minutes, him threatening to arrest me, my friends, hold us overnight, etc., and me refusing to get into his car. The cop then leers at me and asks, "What? Are you afraid of being kidnapped?" And I mean, how messed up is that, right? I glance toward my car and see my friends piled up at the back window watching. The 2 guys are looking ready to jump out at any moment. The cop turns to look at them too. I don't know what went through his mind, but after being completely aggressive with me for what seemed like forever, he finally gave me a really creepy smile, handed back my license and insurance, tipped his hat, then got into the car and just drove off. At this point, I was shaking so badly that my friends had to help me get back into the car. I don't even remember if he gave me a ticket, to be honest. I was just glad that I had not cried in front of this guy, but I totally broke down once I was back in seat. To this day, I still think about this terrible person deciding to terrorize a young college female at 3 in the morning in the middle of rural Texas, and often wonder what would have happened if I had not stood my ground and instead just gotten into that cop car. This happened when I was 15, near Algonquin Park. My father and I were driving up to our cottage in the middle of winter. I was always really amazed at the beauty of the park and Muskoka in general, and had grown up enjoying the beauty of it every summer. Our cottage was on a large lake, about a 30-minute drive from the nearest town. There were probably thousands of cottages on the lake. During the summer, the lake and the town's population tripled. It was cottage country, so people would spend all summer enjoying the lake and warm nights around the campfires with family and friends. I spent every summer there growing up, and it still brings fond memories of sunshine, laughter, and the sound of a motorboat on the lake. But the winters, they were different. The people that didn't live there all year round would venture back home to city life, leaving the area mostly deserted, with cottages boarded up for the winter. There were a few people that would still frequently come up every couple of months for a few days or so, but for the most part, the lake was silent during the winters, and the town was just filled with locals. The beautiful pine trees, they're always covered with snow, making the forest quiet. Our cottage was on a dead-end road, but there were about 20 other cottages on the road, with ours being somewhat in the middle. The cottages were quite spaced out, however, with our closest neighbours being too far away to see through the trees. My dad had needed to head up to the cottage to do some painting that my mum had been bugging him to do for some time. It was at the end of February, and it was a long weekend, so I tagged along so that he wouldn't be alone, and we would spend some quality time together and all that. It was about a 5-hour drive from our home, but turned out to be an 8-hour drive due to the heavy snow. It had gotten pretty dark out quickly, and it was around midnight as we drove through the park. It was deadly quiet and pitch black except for the headlights of the car, that is. We finally passed through the park, with only about 30 minutes left to get to the cottage. It had stopped snowing and we were both eager to get there. As we turned onto the familiar road, I remember my dad cursing. It hadn't been plowed yet. This wasn't surprising, however. It probably wouldn't be until later the next day that we would even see a snowplow. As we drove down the road, I noticed that there was a fresh set of tire tracks. The Smiths must be up for the weekend, my dad had said. All of a sudden, as we drove around the bend, following the tire tracks, the headlights of the car shone on a white van that was parked on the side of the road. It was almost hidden by the vast trees that were covered with snow. "What the?" my dad mumbled. As we drove past the white van, I remember looking back through the back window and very clearly seeing 2 figures in the front seat, illuminated by our retreating taillights. I told my dad this, and he shrugged. Maybe they're lost. I nodded, but couldn't help to think about how it was a dead-end road and why they would feel the need to park there of all places. As we pulled into our driveway and we started bringing our stuff in, I just couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I couldn't stop thinking about the van and why it was there, with 2 people just sitting in the dark in the middle of the night like that. It spooked me so much that I begged my dad to let me sleep upstairs with him, instead of sleeping downstairs in the room that my sister and I usually shared. It had big windows with no blinds that looked out into the blackness of the forest, and my 15-year-old self was already scared of the dark, even without seeing the white van. It wasn't a big deal when my sister was there, but not this night. As my dad got ready for bed, I sat in the living room reading a book. My dad had turned all the lights off, and I was just using a small lamp next to the couch to try and get through one last chapter before bed. It was so quiet that I could almost hear my ears ringing. And it was then that I also started to get the feeling that I was being watched. The living room had large windows, also with no curtains, that overlooked the lake, and it was black, except for a light or two from cottages across the lake. I shut off the lamp and I got up. Now that the cottage was dark, the moon was shining brightly, illuminating the snow. It was really beautiful, and I walked towards the window to get a better look, and movement caught my eye. And I remember my heart dropping as I saw two figures down by the back porch, below the window, barely hidden by the surrounding trees. I dropped to the floor and crawled towards the bedroom where my dad was sleeping. My heart was in my throat. I wasn't sure if they had seen me or not, but I woke up my dad, and by the time that he got to the window, the two figures were gone. Where I had seen the figures, though, two sets of footprints in the snow led back around to the front of the cottage and back down the driveway. I begged my dad not to go outside. He double-checked the locks and turned on the porch lights, hopefully to scare anyone off. My dad wasn't as freaked out as I was, but still set the alarm before he headed back to bed. I remember being very freaked out, and I lay there all night next to my dad, terrified that I would look out the window and that I would see someone staring back at me. The next morning, my dad went outside and confirmed that there were two sets of footprints leading from the road to in behind our cottage, and then back around to the front of the cottage, and then back up to the road. There were tire marks that showed the vehicle had turned around and then gone back up to the main road. My dad guessed that they were probably looking to break in and steal stuff, as it was the middle of winter, and not too many people were up at the lake at this point. But they knew that we were there. They would have seen our tire tracks leading to our cottage, and my dad's car parked out front. They also may have seen the lamp that I had turned on to read, or seeing it go off. My dad didn't have an answer for that, and after much back and forth, he called the non-emergency line and reported it. Apparently, there had been some break-ins in the area, and some stuff had been stolen from some cottages that were boarded up for the winter. But again, and I still wonder to this day, why would they be interested in stealing from a house that clearly has people inside of it? So I used to work on the north slope of Alaska. It was March on the slope, and while still in the depths of Arctic winter, with the equinox approaching, the day and night cycle was becoming more even. My flight to the slope was delayed due to a large blizzard, which shut down everything. I spent 3 days waiting in Anchorage until the storm cleared and we were able to fly again. Landing at the airstrip, it was evident quickly that the blizzard was more severe than we had initially thought. While whiteout blizzards are pretty common, actual snow accumulation isn't. This storm, though, was a monster. Snowdrifts several stories tall ran up against the camp housing. Our work trucks and equipment were completely covered in snow, and it took a full day of digging to get them out. As soon as the trucks were free, we were off to our first job assignment. No time to rest in the oil field. Traveling anywhere after a storm this size is an absolute nightmare. To get to the work site, we had a bulldozer have to escort us, breaking up any remaining drifts as we went. The dozer cleared our work area around the well house, and we began to rig up our equipment. It took a little bit of time, but soon we were back to the normal humdrum life of Arctic oil well maintenance. Now, over the radio, we got a call from the bulldozer operator as he left that he had seen a giant black animal headed our direction. He couldn't tell if it was a wolf or a big dog, but it was massive apparently and moving erratically. In the winter, many animals are not active on the slope. Caribou, musk oxen, and foxes are the usual wildlife you'll encounter out here in the snow. The animals keep to themselves for the most part though. You learn very quickly to never look the animals in the eyes if they approach you. This goes doubly for the foxes, and I advise you to do the same. The grizzlies are hibernating though. The male polar bears are hunting on the sea ice, while the females are denned up with the cubs. Wolves aren't unheard of, but rarely leave the Brooks Range Mountains a couple of 100 miles to the south. Whatever the operator saw, we would keep watch, but it wasn't really our problem. It was really a problem for the bear police, so we went about our work, albeit cautiously. It's interesting to note that oil companies on the slope have private security officers who, besides being private law enforcement, also try to minimize encounters with wildlife. We refer to them as the bear police, which is a cute name for a rather dangerous part of their job. These security officers are really the only personnel on the North Slope, outside of regular law enforcement, that can carry firearms. Their primary job when encountering large predators is to harass them until they leave. This is done with beanbag guns or loud noises at first, and when that fails or the animal is unusually aggressive, lethal force is needed. So, we had settled into our work and forgot about the wolf or the dog or whatever it was. I needed to take a leak, so I got out of the truck and walked behind the well house to take care of business. My crewmate came over the radio telling me to get back in the truck though, because there was a wolf coming out from behind the well house where I had just been, and he was pacing after me. I didn't look behind me. I just ran back and jumped into the truck. I mean, I'm not taking any chances, even if it was a crewmate's practical joke. But once inside, I looked out, and sure enough, trotting towards the truck was a large black male wolf. He approached our trucks and sort of plopped down on the snow in front of us. This wolf looked rough, man, even by wild animal standards. The right side of his face was mutilated and completely deformed. He was missing his right eye, and most of his skin and lips on the side of his head was gone. The wound exposed large white teeth, giving him the appearance of a wide, crooked smile. He didn't appear aggressive, but he didn't take his good eye off of us either. That one good eye was bright red in appearance as well, and it was eerie, to say the least. The way he sat there, staring, watching, just waiting. We radioed the security officers for help, and like a speeding bullet, they showed up 40 minutes later. That whole time waiting, the wolf never diverted his attention from us. Quite honestly, if I hadn't have seen him breathing for myself, then I would have assumed that it was a statue. That's how still it was. The security officers arrived though, and they took some pictures for their reports. Then they began the process of driving the animal back out into the tundra. Truck horns didn't startle it, didn't even flinch. Charging him with their truck? That did nothing either. They then took aim with a beanbag gun and hit him square in the ribs. The wolf let out a yelp, but didn't get up or move from his spot. The next beanbag hit him in the head, and that seemed to jostle him enough to get up and leave. Security told us to call back if we saw the wolf again. They seemed confident that he would move on and not be a bother anymore. The sun was setting, and our job was still hours from wrapping up. Working a 13 to 15 hour day isn't unusual here. You either get used to it, to the long hours, or you find another line of work pretty quick, let me tell you. I was running the computer equipment inside the truck, and weird data was coming back from the tools down in the well. They were blanking out and losing signal, or they were reporting data backwards, but diagnostics wasn't indicating any issues. To the computer systems, everything was operating normally. I tried a few different things to fix the issue, but it persisted. One of the workers went out to the wellhead to check the gauges and cables and whatnot, trying to isolate the problem from there. He was outside for not more than 5 minutes before the night was pierced by a long, bellowing howl. This was immediately followed by the high-pitched shriek of our crewmate. Throwing the door open, I was able to catch a fleeting glimpse of a dark, huge figure running behind the well house. Our crewmate ran past us and jumped inside. Pale, sweating, and full of adrenaline, he tried to relay to us what had just happened. Through his panting, he said that he was in the well house checking the cables when someone walked up behind him. Thinking that it was one of us, he started a conversation with his back turned. When he got no reply, he turned and was met face to face with a 7-foot-tall black wolf standing on his hind legs. It stood behind him in the door, growling. Without thinking, he flung his pipe wrench at the beast, struck him hard in the chest, and that's when it let out a howl and ran off. Our crewmate was adamant that this was the same wolf from earlier, because its face was mangled in that sort of crooked half smile and one fiery red eye look. Myself and the others on the crew, we had a hard time believing that he saw a giant wolf man like that. We had no doubt that he saw the wolf, but we reasoned that in his panic he saw something that wasn't really there, that it was upright like a man like that. But I have to admit that we'd all encountered enough weird things on the slope to never count out the impossible here. We radioed the security officers, though, and told them that the wolf had returned and waited inside the truck. I mean, what else could we do but wait, too? I wasn't about to go out there and fight Satan's guard dog with a clipboard and a mouse pad. Weirdly, too, every time we felt like things settled down outside, we would hear a growl or something would push against the truck or something. Periodically, we could see something pacing in the dark just beyond the reach of our work lights. Even though we were inside a locked truck cabin, it was still a very vulnerable feeling. We were very much trapped, and I'm sure it felt similar to what divers experience inside of a shark cage far out at sea. All of this, though, went on for an hour while we waited for someone to show up. Finally, coming up the road, we could see headlights of 3 approaching vehicles. The security team had finally showed up, this time with actual rifles. Over the radio, we told them what had been going on, and you could feel their disbelief and eyes rolling through the radio as they spoke to us. But that sass and disbelief soon faded when we explored the worksite and found it covered in fresh, large wolf tracks. The security team, they split up with 2 trucks headed out to search for this wolf, while the last one remained with us, and we loaded our equipment and finished our job. We didn't hear or see anything else that night as we cleaned up, but we sure did keep our heads on a swivel. The security officers didn't find the wolf that night. A set of tracks left off the worksite and out into the open tundra. The officers commented that the tracks looked a bit weird. This was due to them only seeing the back paw prints in the snow, apparently. That last security truck escorted us back to the main camp while the others continued their search into the night. For the following week, various reports came in across the oil field of people seeing this mangled black wolf during the day, and at night, reports kept coming back in of a black beast walking upright and harassing or cornering workers. Security seemed to always show up minutes too late, too. During this time frame, many of the Alaska native workers were getting really nervous. One of our friends in the camp workshop was a native from a small Inuit village just west of the oil field, and he told us that it sounded exactly like an Ijirak, a shape-shifting creature that can take the form of an Arctic animal while it hunts. He said that it was obvious as the wolf was a normal, albeit deformed animal in the daylight, but transformed into an upright monster after nightfall. These creatures are thought to be Inuit hunters that traveled too far north and became stuck between the world of the living and the dead. They apparently transformed into evil, deformed men with sideways mouths and eyes. They use their power of shapeshifting to hunt other Inuit, especially children. And the people here are wary of wild animals for this very reason. A week following our encounter, though, the security team was able to corner the wolf on a remote worksite. Apparently, it had attacked and trapped 2 welders in their truck. Both workers had superficial cuts through their snowsuits, but were otherwise fine. And having no other choice, the wolf was euthanized on the spot. But security shot the wolf once, and instead of dropping dead, it charged the officer that shot it. The wolf took 3 more high-powered rifle shots before, eventually, it collapsed at the feet of the officer. even then, paralyzed in the now red snow, the wolf was still growling through its crooked wide smile. After several minutes, apparently it finally succumbed to its wounds and it died. The wolf's body was taken to the University of Alaska Fairbanks for dissection and examination. Outside of the facial deformities and gnarled appearance, the biologist concluded that it was an ordinary wolf from the Brooks Range Mountains, albeit a rather large one. But how it got hundreds of miles from home and why it stayed on the tundra, that is a complete mystery that the biologist really couldn't explain. So, I'd like to share a strange occurrence from last night with all of you guys and get your thoughts. My wife and I, we put the kids to bed at 9:30 and went to bed ourselves around the usual time of 10:30 or 11. But we were sleeping in a spooning position, sideways on the mattress, which isn't our usual sleeping posture, but since I washed my hair before going to bed, I needed my dreadlocks to hang off to the side and drain any excess water. At an unknown time of the night, still half asleep, semi-conscious, I see our door opening slowly, as if someone is entering our room. I zonk out, again, shortly after I feel a set of tiny hands holding my own, playing with my fingers and palms, as your kid usually would. I'm thinking that it may be my 9-year-old son, but it's highly unlikely, since neither one of my kids go into our room, like ever. They always stay in their own. At the time, I was too tired to respond, so my analytical skills weren't running at full capacity, and I wrote it off and dozed off again. Next thing I know, I feel this pulsating force on my back, and a slight buzz in both of my ears, forcing me to slightly open my eyes. And I can see these, colorful lights. My eyes are squinting, so the brightness isn't too overwhelming. The colors change as well as the patterns, going from sort of lines to multi-angled shapes, almost like some kind of a hallucinogenic effect. For context too, I don't consume anything. No prescription drugs, no street drugs, or any other recreational substances. The last drink that I had was a can of Coke and whiskey last weekend. That's it. I can't tell how long the lights lasted for too, but it was not a sleep paralysis episode, and I didn't feel any kind of anxiety or feeling like being trapped or in danger, as most sleep paralysis episodes are like. Soon after, I hear my wife say, "Who opened our door?" The doorknob would have had to have been turned in order to open the door, by the way, so we are puzzled by how the door could be open like that. Alarms go off at around 6 in the morning, and we begin to regain consciousness. Time to wake up the kids so they can pack their lunches and get dressed and all that. I tell my wife what I felt in the middle of the night, and her eyes get big as she says that she felt a movement on the bed, like the weight that she would feel if the cat got into our room, which is the reason that we shut our door completely, so we won't wake up to the cat purring on our faces. I ask the kids, though, how they slept and casually ask if they were up for any reason, hoping one of them tells me that they got into our room and that would explain at least the hands touching and the weight on the bed and all that. I could easily write off the lights and the pulsating to very vivid dreams. But they each respond that they slept fine and they didn't leave their rooms. For context too, neither one of them sleepwalks or anything similar. Now, even more puzzled, I pull myself together to get ready to drive the kids to school. I brush my teeth and catch myself staring at my reflection. My eyes look sort of empty though, and it disturbed me so much I couldn't stand looking at myself. I may have psyched myself out, but I don't know. Anyway, that is pretty much it. And if you have any input, be it humorous or phenomenon, serious spiritual stuff, it's all welcome. This whole thing was so significant that I just had to share it here. Thanks for listening, and like I said, if you have any thoughts, then please do share them. I'm a corrections officer in the Deep South, and I just entered my 7th year working in my facility. I've always been semi-religious, but nothing serious. Just your typical small-town church kind of thing. However, I work in a big city jail, and I've had some minor things happen over the years that didn't really make me think ghosts, but it's creepy nonetheless, especially working overnights. It's dark, silent, you're alone most of the time, plus you're usually a little bit drowsy, so I always just chalked it up to that. Some of these small experiences include random footsteps from around my control room when all the inmates are locked up, voices in places that are no longer in use, stuff like this. However, this isn't about any of those minor experiences that I just mentioned. It's about this encounter or experience from around a week ago. I've talked to a couple of close friends and some guys at work, and we can't seem to figure it out. I've tried to wrap my mind around this as best as I can, but I'm honestly at my wit's end. So I thought that I might as well share it here and see what sticks, or if someone can perhaps help me reason with whatever happened. So, for context, the floor that I work is typically a floor reserved for mid-security violent inmates. This would include robbery suspects, domestic violence, assault, etc. Typical night for me is to come in and lock down all inmates for the night and then conduct what we call a standing head count. Basically, I come in and put eyes on every inmate on the floor. If my roster says that I have 170 inmates, I have to physically count 170 inmates. Well, the facility is currently undergoing modernization upgrades. This includes new doors, locks, day space, tables and furniture and stuff like that. And, most importantly, cameras. On my floor, all pods are full to capacity, except for C Block. This pod is currently locked out, meaning that no inmates are to be housed in the pod until all upgrades are done and in place. They've been working on it for about 3 weeks now. They've put in all the new doors, locks and cameras. The camera feeds are shown on a small screen inside the control room of the floor, with their cell number placed in the bottom right corner of each cell. So I shouldn't have to worry about counting in C Block as there are no inmates in C Block. Well, 1 week ago, after finishing my head count, I came back to the control room and I do my usual routine. I pull up Chrome and just browse the internet until I have to do my hourly check to make sure that everyone is okay. At around midnight, I finish doing another check and I sit down in the control room. As I go to sit down, I take a quick glance at the screen with all the cameras. In C Block 4 cell, I swear that I saw a person standing in the center of the cell, facing out towards the door of that cell. I do a double take and, of course, nothing is there. Okay, so maybe I saw someone in B Block, standing in this cell, or maybe the camera froze for a second. About 30 minutes later, I sit up in my chair as I'm putting my phone down. This time again, I see someone standing in C Block 4 cell. And this time, I know that it's that cell because I'm looking at that number. The cell door is wide open, as are all the doors in C Block, so it's for sure that cell. I full tilt sprint into that block and look up into 4 cell. But when I do, there's nothing and no one. I begin to think that I must be seeing things, or the camera is somehow messing up. I put in a report to our electronic maintenance department, and they say they'll look into it. I came back the next night, and the report states that all the wiring is fine, and that the camera feed is in fact linked to C Block 4 cell, and everything should be fine. After going home and thinking about it, I convinced myself that I was wrong somehow, that it was just me being tired. Again, same process comes and goes, lockdown, head count, back to the control room to wait. I'm now glancing every once in a while at C Block 4 cell. Nothing appears. Midnight comes and goes, and I think, okay, yeah, it must have been me. But then 2 o'clock rolls around, and again I do my check, sit back down in the control room. Again, all the doors in C block are all the way open, and these doors are not light. They are big metal doors, easily 60 to 70 pounds. And that is when C block 4 cell slams shut. Then, after it is shut and now locked, it sounds like it's starting to be kicked by a horse or something. Like someone slammed it shut right on the back end of a full-grown horse. I look on the camera screen and all the cameras in that pod are just blinking on and off. I go into the block, and as I'm going up the stairs towards the door, more doors start to shut. From 6 to 5, 3, 2, 1. At this point, I'm just done. I ran out of that block, shut the door, and called for a supervisor and maintenance. We checked the footage of the event on the supervisor's computer in his office, and of course, none of them show anything. At around the 2 o'clock mark, they all just go to no connection with our local server at the HQ building across the street. When maintenance went to check everything, they did say that it was definitely not the lock, but it did look like someone had tried to kick that door off its hinges because the door frame itself had chipped paint after having just freshly painted it. I've scoured incident reports back to 5 years, and I cannot find anything about any violent deaths or just anyone dying in general on this floor. That being said, my department has sealed reports in the past where if you're under an LT, you won't be able to read the report anyway. So, I'm not sure. I'm still working on this floor. They are on their last few days of fixing up C block, and then they'll move to D block. They still have 3 more blocks after D block to do, so I'm a little bit concerned of what will happen once these are empty and not in use. Things in C block seem to have calmed down as nothing major has happened since last week. Doors still move and I've had to shut, but not like that night a week ago. I've put in for vacation towards the end of May as well, so I'm hoping that maybe some time away will help, and hopefully it'll be a fix by then. But I must admit that it's turned me from a non-believer to a skeptic on the low end to a possible believer on the high end. I just don't think that the AC could blow a 60-pound door shut, nor could it cause the door to be hit that violently, so much that the paint chipped. If anyone has a similar experience or has any ideas, then please do let me know. I work in the woods for a living here in the western US, lately as a fire lookout, in a remote location. I'm talking a 3-mile hike to a mostly abandoned dirt road, and another hour drive before you even hit pavement. This was last summer. It was around 11 p.m. on a moonless night, pitch black outside, and the lights of the town 30 miles away have mostly dimmed at this point. It was a relatively calm night, very little wind. The tower sits atop a more or less bald spot, atop a lower peak in the middle of a burn scar. There's really not much in the immediate area, besides some long grass and a smattering of younger fir trees. And at around 11 p.m, I'm sitting there under the glow of a propane light out on the porch, finishing a book. I suddenly hear a rustling coming from down the hill to the south, maybe about 20 degrees down from where I was sitting. It was just barely audible and sounded like it was maybe 300 feet away. It was very sudden and sent a shiver up my spine, but I went back inside, grabbed my flashlight to have a look around from the catwalk. There was nothing at all out there in that direction that I could immediately detect. But then I saw it. Well, I saw something. To this day, I'm really still not certain what it was, to be honest, but what I do know is that it wasn't a trick of the light or my eyes or anything. I looked at that exact spot the next few nights and never saw it again, but I know my home like the back of my hand. Every tree, every shrub. This was not that. Out in the distance, next to a lone boundary tree, was a vague shape, dark and ill-defined, despite the surrounding area being relatively in focus. It looked to be about maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, roundish, definitely wider than the tree, roughly human-shaped, but not quite right, like it was some memory of what a human looks like from someone who hasn't seen another one in a long time. It was hunched over, and I watched it for what felt like forever. It didn't move, not initially, but after a bit, it shifted slowly to my right behind the tree, and then it was gone, and I never saw it again. Now, the weird thing is that I should have been able to see it behind the skinny tree, and if it went down the hill or the side of the hill, I would have seen it. Like I said, this relatively small snag was on its own, on a relatively gentle downslope, so the fact that it just sort of went around the tree and disappeared like that just doesn't make any sense. Now, this is an area with a lot of animals, mostly white-tailed deer and wild cows. We have some black bears, some elk, some cougars, and even some wolves, but they don't tend to let themselves be seen, and they tend to skitter off when they learn that they're being observed as well. I've seen the predators before, but never that close to my tower. The whitetails and the elk come up, but there's little in terms of food. People are known to come here from time to time, but it's really rare. We also have visitors and hunters, but my location in particular is only really known to locals and doesn't exist on public maps or anything. The official start of the extremely overgrown, hard to follow, and obviously abandoned trail is about 2 miles after a locked and unmarked gate. Hunters, they don't tend to come up here because the animals don't tend to come too close. Poachers wouldn't because they're aware that we report to law enforcement. So, all of this is to say that I have no idea what that was, but boy, did it freak me out. It still freaks me out a little to this day even, and I really hope that it was just a person or an animal in some weird circumstance, but I'm not so sure about that. What I do know is that I don't feel too comfortable sitting outside after dark here anymore. I really love to drive for DoorDash on my free time. Something about getting out past midnight and just driving is very soothing to me. Why not make some money doing it too, right? Well, my wife hates it though. Specifically me going out past midnight in what she calls the bad sides of town. I don't see it like that though. I've driven for DoorDash for a bit now, and I've never once felt a fear for my own safety, much less a fear for my life, and I love driving on the west side, south side, and downtown around midnight. But let me run through my shift tonight. So, I started my dash in at around 5 p.m. to hit the dinner rush, and it was slow, so I did a lot of waiting for a while. 6 p.m. I started feeling oddly restless, in a way that I haven't felt before. I felt like I needed to get out of my car and run a mile or something, like I just couldn't keep my legs still. I parked at a gas station to walk around and get a soda and a water to calm my nerves, and it worked for a bit. 7 p.m. I drove to the west side. I felt great and was doing really well with how much I was making. No changes in how I did things at all, too. It was just a very average hour, to be honest. The only thing that I did notice was that I was making tons of stupid mistakes. I was missing turns, driving too slow, even stopped at a green light as if it was a stop sign. At 8 p.m. I started working the south side, and this is when things got, weird for a lack of a better term. I left the west side with the sun still showing, but by the time that I made it, the sun was completely gone. This was odd too, considering that I've never noticed it gets so dark so quickly before. What I mean is that I drive this almost every day, but this was different. It didn't just get dark in a sort of normal way. It got dark normally, but this time I was hyper aware of it, I guess. It's hard to explain, but I just noticed it so much more than before. This is when my anxiety started creeping back. My legs got restless again. I started feeling like I needed to get out of my car and run a mile again, but I brushed it off and continued my work. Although I remained hyper aware of the darkness, and during one order when I was picking up food I could feel it, The darkness was heavy and deep, almost like a low frequency that I just couldn't hear or something, but was sort of vibrating throughout my body. I could feel the heaviness of my heart causing strain on my chest, though, and I thought that I could hear it drumming in my ears as well at one point. At 9 p.m, I accepted an order that took me to the western area of the south side, an area and neighborhood that I've been in hundreds of times before. I stopped my car at the house, and something just hit me like a ton of bricks. All of a sudden, I felt really scared, but not like average fear. There was this absolute sense of complete and total dread that just overtook me. In an instant, I felt like I was being stared at too, and I know it's such a cliche thing to say, but I'm being completely serious when I say that I would have bet all my money that there was someone in the backseat of my car staring at me all of a sudden. I could feel the heaviness almost, just like earlier in the night tonight. Sitting in my car in front of this home, I started to tear up a bit, as I felt closer to death than I ever have before. I worked up the bravery to turn around, but of course when I did, nothing was in the back seat, besides the darkness that felt really heavy, as if it was made of solid matter. I just cannot explain, though, how physical the darkness of my back seat felt. Like I was staring at a person sitting in the back seat, like their weight was being put onto the car, but nobody was there. I got out of my car to try and shake it off, and when I did, I saw another car pull up in the driveway of the home. I thought that maybe I could hand it to them and get on my way, but they just sort of sat in their car looking at me, and looking down at the shining light that I could see was their phone. They did this 3 times before I worked up the bravery, and I walked the order to the door, every step further increasing my sense of absolute horror for some reason. But I dropped it off, took the picture, and rushed to my car. I turned to my left, seeing the person still sitting in their car in the driveway, their face illuminated by their phone, but they were just sort of staring at me. I locked my doors and I looked in the back seat again. Still nobody there, and it was confirmed due to the light being on from the opening door. But because I locked the door, the light slowly dimmed to darkness again. And the feeling this time was heavier than even before. As soon as the darkness of my back seat hit, it was like the car was full of people sitting back there, just staring intensely back at me. I couldn't look away from the darkness. I felt like I was being crushed by the fear and the anxiety. I turned my car around quickly and I drove off, noticing how the person in the car in the driveway was now no longer in the car, which didn't make any sense because how the heck did they get out of the car so quickly? 9:30 hit and I closed out my shift at this point. I was sobbing in the driver's seat with my inside car lights on as I drove home. My mind was spinning. I was lightheaded. The sense of absolute total horror was gone, and in its place was just a void, emptiness, as if something occupied my soul for just a moment and then left it wide open and vacant. I walked into my home. My wife greeted me, noting how I returned early. I fell into her arms and sobbed again. It's now 11 p.m. and I'm sitting on my couch with all the lights on, and I just feel utterly alone, empty, completely void of all emotion besides one feeling, a slight semblance of fear sitting in that empty void. My wife wanted me to take out the trash to the dumpster outside, but I just couldn't do it. I don't know why, but I just can't go back outside in the dark tonight. I know that this whole thing is really weird to say the least, but if any of you guys know anything about what might have happened tonight, please do tell me, because that fear, it's still sitting with me. Around 2014, in a summer in a small provincial town in Ecuador, I was working in my father's farm. He was dedicated to livestock, so every weekend after school, he'd help with daily tasks, such as feeding the cows and go over to them to make sure that they're not missing or have any problems and stuff. Well, one Saturday I did a routine afternoon batch check around 3 p.m. For some reason I couldn't do it earlier, so I rode my horse called Loco and went to see them in the afternoon. It was a bit of a trip, but it was about 50 minutes to an hour because there was a shortage of pasture on the farm and we had to rent a piece of land nearby. The outward journey and the batch check passed without incident. It was around 5:30 in the afternoon, so I started the journey back, and 30 minutes back home, I just felt a strange, I don't know, like wind on my body or something. I was skeptical until that moment, but for some weird reason, that feeling made me think something bad was about to happen. Almost instantly, too, I noticed that Loco began to struggle with the reins. Something strange, since he was a noble and really calm horse. However, he began to move his ears abruptly, his hair curled, and his body struggled against the side of the road, as if to say, I want to dodge something and run. And with all my strength, I tried to control him with the reins while that was happening, and my head involuntarily turned to the right, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black silhouette, maybe 1.5 meters away from us, disappear from the fence that surrounded us and made its way through the undergrowth. The undergrowth began trembling, and it was breaking everything when it disappeared. It didn't run, it didn't fly, it simply just sort of vanished. I really don't think it was an animal too, since it didn't make any animal noises or the typical sound when an animal or a person flees. Whatever this thing was, it seemed almost supernatural or something. What I mean is that it just sort of vanished in a huge rumble of dry undergrowth. While that happened too, in a brief second, my hands went completely numb from the force that I applied on the wheels, and Loco simply started running, and I, still confused, held on with the little strength that I had left so as not to fall and injure myself. After minutes of intense running, Loco finally stopped his gallop. I went down to drink some water in a stream, and it was at this time that I noticed that my eyes began to burn like nothing else. They just burned like having bathed in pepper spray or something, and I hadn't done or touched anything to make this happen. When I got home and unsaddled my horse, I went inside, and my mother asked me almost immediately what had happened to my eyes. I simply replied that it was my sweat, that it wasn't necessary for her to be alarmed that way, but she insisted that I go look in the mirror, and when I did, I noticed that my eyes were full of blood, almost like crying blood too. There was not a single white space in my eyes any longer. There was nothing but 2 meatballs filled with red as vivid as blood. That obviously scared me, and I couldn't help but feel that it was somehow related to that black thing that I saw. It should be noted that my doctor couldn't find a medical or even a logical explanation about what had happened to my eyes, and that no medication helped. In fact, my eyes remained that way pretty much for 2 months. Telling this to my mum and brother, they just froze. My brother went the next day to check the area where I had seen that sighting, to have a look around and see if he could find anything, and he told me that there were no trails, roads, or at least one broken branch. Everything was completely clean. It was just really weird, and there were no plants there that would cause this. He acquired some water samples for the doctor, and they came back negative too. It's been 8 years, and I remember it vividly, and I haven't been back to that place since then. Loco unfortunately died a year ago, and it's sad to know that he was my partner and the only one who ever experienced that with me. I miss you, Loco. I go hunting in southern Illinois on property that my family owns. The place is practically my second home, and I've spent countless hours exploring all around every inch of it. Caught all the fish in the area, I've hunted every legal game and spotted the rest. So when I say that I've never had an experience like this, remember that this was my domain that I felt comfortable in any weather, at any time, with any equipment, or even lack thereof. So 2 deer seasons ago, I'd pulled into the farm at probably about 4:40 in the morning. It was November, so at least 2 hours till sunlight. I pull my stuff out of the truck and I walk into the woods. I have my shotgun and a revolver knife on my belt, an elbow light clipped to the front of me, a thermos of coffee, and a backpack with a book and a couple of other things for cleaning my deer should I get lucky. So, I walk off the drive and into the woods. The tree stand that I'm going to is less than a mile away, but through some dense second-growth forest and down a rather steep hill, across some bottoms, then a lung-burning steep climb up another ridge. I always dread the hike, but it's a good spot, so I often do it. I make it down to the bottoms, slush through the icy muck, and get to the climbing. With my flashlight clipped to my chest, I keep needing to physically turn my body to throw the beam around and see trees that I recognize to determine my path. This, of course, always gives the forest a horror movie vibe, even on the best of days. The leaves and the underbrush are encased in frost, so every one of my steps comes with a solid crunch, no matter how quiet I'm trying to be. This time, though, I noticed that there was more noise than usual. What I mean is that something else was crunching close by too. I walked about maybe a quarter of the way up the hill listening to my company the whole time, seeming to stay the same distance away as I moved. Naturally, I think to myself that I'm going to have a quick hunting day, so I plop my butt down next to a tree. I can't shoot until first light, but I'm hoping if I stay really still that whatever I'm hearing will lounge around until then. So I click off my light, unsling the shotgun, and I lay it over my knees to wait. Except I don't really hear anything now. Whatever it was, it must have been spooked by my flashlight spinning all around as I sat. I still stayed a bit, sipping some coffee to make sure, but I gave up after 15 minutes or so of dead silence from the forest floor. And I probably didn't even make it 4 steps before the moving starts again. At this point, I'm still not freaked out. I stay facing the way that I am, and I flip the light off again and sidestep behind a tree. But sure enough, I don't hear anything again. 2 minutes of sitting there frustrated before I start moving again, and my new friend does too. And this is where I started to get a bit nervous because I worked my way up the hill, stopping to turn and look every so often. And when I stopped, the sound would go on for just an infinitesimally longer amount of time than my own steps. Like something seeing me stop and doing its very best to stop before I heard it. This happened no less than 4 times as well, and by now, I'm sweating bullets and freezing cold because, well, it's the middle of winter. I abandoned my thermos near a tree so that I could hold my flashlight and my revolver at the same time, and the last 100 feet or so to my stand was done backwards so that I could be facing the noise and, in theory, keep it from moving. And I didn't hear anything again after that. I got up into my stand and I smoked like 5 cigarettes in a row. It gave me a sense of security being up in a tree behind camouflage like that. Still, I only hunted for like an hour of daylight and went back early that day, and I wasn't moving slow headed back to the truck, even with the sun shining bright at this point. Now, I haven't told my family about this because, well, I don't think that they would believe me, but man, when I think back about it, it was freaky. The sound, and when it decided to happen, felt, well, very human, which it likely was, as poachers and trespassers occasionally wander onto our property. Still, ever since then, when I go hunting, I'm much better about letting people know where I am going and for how long these days. I still don't know what that was. I didn't see anything, which is perhaps the most strange part. I thought that I would have seen something at least, being that the sound sounded so close. In the end, I still have no idea what happened that day, and if you guys know anything about what it could have been, then I would love to hear it. Growing up in the 90s, I was always exposed to a fair amount of aliens in the media. Movies and TV like Independence Day, MIB, Mars Attacks, E.T., X-Files, Invader Zim, Alf, Third Rock from the Sun. I can't remember anyone in my family ever taking any sort of particular interest in aliens, but they were just always sort of, around. I don't know if this media is why, or maybe it was my parents' open attitude towards the subject, but I never questioned the existence of them. I knew stories about people being abducted in crop circles, but I didn't feel like it presented any sort of immediate danger. I never considered myself to be afraid of them. That is, until my mum started asking me about it one morning. I've always been a sleep talker. Well, more of a sleep mumbler, I guess, but when I was 9 or 10, I started sleepwalking as well. My parents would find me in the living room or the hallway trying to incoherently accomplish something. Most of the time, they could just guide me back to my bed without incident. But on one occasion, it just wasn't that simple. When my mum came to check on me before she went to sleep, she saw that I wasn't in my bed. She came into the room to look for me and noticed a small figure crouched in the closet. She asked me what I was doing and came closer to help me back to bed. And as she started to approach, I guess that I started crying and mumbling about aliens, and I even peed on the floor. She was shocked and called for my dad to come and help her. When he arrived, he tried to pick me up to comfort me, but I started screaming and I hit him in the face apparently, something that I'd never done before and haven't done again since then. They had to let me cry myself out, mumbling the aliens and don't take me again over and over until I would let them help me. My mum says that she doesn't think that I ever really woke up too, because I didn't say anything as she changed my pajamas and tucked me back in. The next morning when she asked me if I had had a dream about aliens, I didn't know what she was talking about. I mean, I had no recollection of anything that had happened the night before. She asked if being abducted by aliens was something that I worried about often, and I honestly told her that it just wasn't. My parents never made a big deal about the occurrence. They just wanted to make sure that I was all right, but I was pretty embarrassed by it. Since I had no memory of the event, I wasn't left with any fear of the aliens while I was awake, but I was left with a burning curiosity, I guess, as to whether they would be back. Nearly 2 years ago now, my husband and I moved to a pretty safe town. We decided to have some fun while we were young and child-free, so we got an apartment downtown. It was super fun. It's on the top of a shopping center with restaurants, boutiques, a theater, all kinds of stuff. We had a blast living there too, and have always felt very safe. Now, I like to go on walks. Since the area is so busy, I've always just sort of walked here and there when I'm alone. I go on a walk about every other day, less in the winter. But for 2 years, I've seen this older man sitting in the shopping center. He always gave me a really bad feeling though, so if I came upon him, I tried to divert my path. But I felt sort of bad for judging, I guess. I said to myself, maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe he's just old and lonely and wants to be out and around people, right? Well, the other night, there was apparently a shooting in the shopping center. It was around 8 o'clock at night, and I never go out that late by myself, so I didn't even know about it until the next morning. It turns out that some older man had kidnapped a woman in the shopping center at gunpoint, assaulted her, and tried to drive away with her even. Her husband drove after them and shot at the guy. She was rescued, and he's apparently now in jail. He admitted to the police that he's been stalking that shopping center for victims, watching the women around there, and I cannot tell you just how many times in the past 2 years that I have crossed paths with this guy. How many times I felt guilty for feeling uncomfortable around him. How many times I was right in his path, an easy target even. I guess the moral of the story is always trust your gut. Always. So I work as an assistant in nursing. I work night shifts through an agency, meaning that I work at all kinds of facilities and places, not just at one place. I've experienced multiple weird and scary things so far, but one in specific stuck out to me. I was at an aged care facility, a nursing home, upstairs down a corridor with another AIN, an RN as well, and 2 residents. They had just had a fight as one had dementia and tried to go into the other's room at a bit past 3 in the morning or something. For reference too, we were standing about maybe 2/3 down the hallway, which was fairly well lit until halfway down, so the corridors aren't too bright. We have enough light on so that we can see everything to the end clearly, but not enough to disturb people. At the end of the hallway are 2 rooms opposite each other, the one on the right being empty as the previous resident had passed away about a few months ago. As the 3 of us are trying to defuse the situation and get them into their rooms, I'm standing with my back to the wall, standing between the residents while the other 2 talk to the residents about the situation. And all of a sudden, I get this weird feeling like something just isn't quite right. Looking back on it, I realize that it felt like I was being watched from somewhere down the end of the corridor, sort of an instinctive feeling, I guess. So I sort of look over, and that was when I see it, a brief flash of movement. What I saw was a black shadow figure run from left to right, but between the 2 rooms at the end of the corridor. No color, not transparent, and definitely not a person. Although it was sort of the shape of a tall man, I guess, but I only saw it for a second though, because as soon as it entered the darkness again of the room, it disappeared. I felt my whole body go numb though. I'd had weird experiences that I couldn't explain before, but never anything like that. We finished dealing with the situation and got them both back to bed, and went to sit down in the nurse's station. Once the RN left, I spoke to my co-worker, a lady that I've worked with plenty of times before, and we have a sort of mutual trust and understanding. She also has a very confident demeanor, and so after a while what I started to realize what it was that I could have been looking at, and I was getting increasingly disturbed. We eventually got to the topic of creepy things that we've experienced in night shifts, and were talking about our stories, hearing things that we can't explain, buzzers going off for empty rooms, things being moved or buzzers being turned off, stuff like that. When the residents in the rooms most definitely can't do it themselves. And after a bit, I explained what I saw earlier in the night to her, and she just stops, looks at me with a really serious face, and tells me to again describe the figure as best as I can. A tall shadow figure, no distinct features, shape of a tall man. Her smile fades quickly, and she paused for a minute, taking in a deep breath before explaining that I'm not the first to see him, apparently. A few of the night staff in that wing, they had seen him too, including herself, and they think that it's the resident who died in that end room, as he fits the description. This resident also was incredibly protective over one of the ladies down the hall a bit, as they think that he was in love with her, and she was quite gentle and frail. She told me of the time that she went to check on this lady after her buzzer went off, but as she walked in, it had already been turned off. This was for a resident who was almost entirely immobile now, and couldn't reach the off button herself. As she walked in, a bit back from the foot of the bed, was that same shadow figure, standing facing the door, waiting for her to come in, and just sort of watched her. She checked the resident, looked okay, and after that, ran out of the room. Whatever it was, it barely moved, but it turned slightly as to keep watching her almost, at all times. She got a co-worker to check the room, and when they did, nothing was there when they both went back. We then decided to go and check the end room that it ran to earlier, and nothing. The only thing out of the ordinary was the wardrobe doors were wide open, as well as the bathroom door too, both with the lock somehow still engaged and working. I should also mention too that these are normally kept locked when the room is vacant, to stop wandering residents from going in and hiding or getting lost and whatnot. But what we did notice was the room felt abnormally cold and had a very dark feeling about it. I've been back to work there several times since then, and that room is still empty and still has that same feeling in it. I've heard some strange things down there too, but nothing that you couldn't make up a decent explanation for, I guess. All in all, it's a really great place to work, I'll admit, but I will never go down there alone again. we're also pretty sure that he stays around to watch over her and protect her like he did before he passed, but I just cannot get over the overwhelming darkness that you can literally feel in that room. I used to frequent a relatively popular 11.5-mile hiking trail. The lot that this trail is on is only about 50 or so acres, so the trail winds back and forth in order to fit. So one day I was hiking. This particular day was very nice, the weather was good, and I hadn't seen a lot of people. At one point, about maybe 10 feet off the trail, I could see where I was going parallel to the same trail as it turned on and sort of snaked back about a mile ahead. I hope that makes sense, but I noticed that by that section of the trail, there was a fallen tree with 3 people sitting on it: a man, a woman, and a boy. This by itself wouldn't have been unusual, as it is one of the most popular trails in this area. The problem was, though, is that they were sitting like completely still and completely silent. Their backs were to me, and they seemed to be staring straight ahead, almost as if they were sort of, entranced or something. I was very unsettled, as this is obviously unusual behavior, so I kept walking, but being as unsettled as I was, I sort of looked back and was startled to find that they were gone. I stopped in my tracks, listening, but hearing nothing. I'll tell you why this startled me too, because any outdoorsman will tell you that sound travels in the woods. Sound becomes entrapped by the canopy and funneled through the trees. If somebody steps 100 feet away, you're likely to hear it, and I, having been raised in the woods, have ears attuned to such sounds. Yet those 3 people were able to move without me hearing, a thing. In the end, I just sort of dismissed it. Maybe my mind was preoccupied and I just hadn't heard them. So I turned back around to keep walking, and ahead of me now, on my section of the trail, there they were, with their backs to me again. I saw them silently walk away over a hill, and after that, I never saw them again. So now, not only had I failed to hear them, but I'd failed to see them walk past me, and I really don't know how. I immediately called my friend up, told him that the children of the corn were out at Swayback, and kept him on the phone so that he could send help if he heard me get hit by a pitchfork or something. There's a possibility, I admit, that I'm remembering details inaccurately, and what happened in reality might have been, much less uncanny, but this experience, it still bugs me to this day, and I'm almost certain that it happened the way I tell it. This all started when I was 14, when my mum met her new boyfriend. His name was Ray. I remember the first time that he met me and my siblings. He looked at my mum and said, "Oh wow, didn't know you had a gang," which, looking back on it, was a very weird thing for him to say, since he had been on a few dates with my mum before and she had told him exactly how many kids she had. Honestly though, Ray seemed like a normal guy at first. He was in his 40s and had 2 older sons from his last marriage, who would sometimes come over for dinner, but things went wrong after he moved in. He would yell a lot and have a loud argument with my mum almost every day and throw things at her, but he would always sweet-talk his way around her afterwards, and this is probably why she didn't leave him sooner. My mum was crazy young when she had us, and she has always been a bit immature for her age, so I think that it made it easier for him. But Ray found it difficult to get along with my siblings and me. He would complain about every little thing that we did wrong and quickly became very controlling. But whenever we complained about how he was acting to our mum, he would accuse us of trying to ruin their relationship. This would work pretty much every time too, since it would cause her to get angry and yell at us instead of him. As we got older, he stopped us from seeing friends that he didn't like and wouldn't allow any friends to come over unless they had his approval first. I realized that he was crazy when he picked me up from school one day, which he never did. and while driving home, he accused my sister and me of trash-talking him behind his back. When I asked him how he would even know that, he told me that he had proof. When we got home, he showed me a tape recorder and played back a recording of my sister and me complaining about him in our bedroom at night. I asked him why the heck he put recorders in our bedroom for, and we had a huge argument over this. But I immediately called my mum and told her. I later found out from her that she never actually said anything about it to him. I made him remove all the tape recorders from our bedroom, but I'm convinced that he kept on hiding them since he would sometimes bring up conversations that my sister and I had while he wasn't around. We were so paranoid that we would whisper and we would never talk about anything private in case he somehow heard it. We were so terrified that he also had cameras as well as tape recorders, and we would dress and undress super quickly so if there were any cameras that he wouldn't be able to see anything. And it really makes me angry thinking about the fear that we lived in while living there. When I was 16, I got a job at a fast food place, and Ray had a big problem with that as well. His reasoning for this was that my boyfriend at the time worked there, and he believed that I was just going there to mess around with my boyfriend. So his way of checking on me was to come and sit in the parking lot and record me. He did this too for a complete month. He would show me the recordings after which and would just lead to even more arguments, ending with 16-year-old me begging a 40-plus man to not stalk me at work. I was pretty much done at this point and moved in with my dad, who had just moved back from New Zealand. My dad was so angry when I told him about everything that had happened, and he wanted to call the cops on Ray, but my mum begged him not to. They broke up a few years later after something unrelated, but thankfully, I never saw him again after this. I was 14 at the time of this incident. I was home with my brother, grandma, and my baby cousin. My brother had invited some girl over. Please remember that part too, because it is key to this story. My brother then introduced us to the girl. She looked normal, but seemed a bit, I don't know, maybe nervous or something. My grandma asked her some questions and told her that if her and my brother needed anything, to let her know. Anyways, my grandma told me to stay upstairs and allow my brother and the girl privacy downstairs. Of course, me being the nosy little sister, I wanted to know everything, especially this new girl that my brother brought home. I sort of snuck down the hall quietly and looked over the banister. I saw the girl looking outside the backyard and also asking my brother questions like, who all live here? Is this your guys' house? It's so nice. Hearing the conversation, I decided to listen to my grandma and go back inside my room. I began to listen to music and felt the urge to look outside my window. I then saw a 2000 Chevrolet Impala parked outside of our driveway. The door was wide open and it appeared to be a man leaving our home with all of our tech items from our home and packing it inside the car. A feeling of dread came over me, like, yo, what is going on? Then the sound of loud talking was heard downstairs, and my brother said, please, you don't have to do this. Just let us leave if you know what's best for you, the girl responded. I hurried and ran to my grandma as quietly as I could to let her know what I saw downstairs and what I heard. She didn't understand the severity of what I was telling her and began to laugh, which kind of made me upset because, our life could have been in danger, right? I heard tires screech and saw the Chevrolet Impala speed down the street. I called out to my brother and he said, in a really distraught voice, what's going on and who was that man outside? I asked. He didn't reply. I walked downstairs and saw my brother shaking his head in disbelief, looking at where our TV used to be. The police came shortly due to my grandma calling them. We were later informed that my brother and the girl met for the first time that day, off of a dating app of all things. And of course, they met at our home. The girl, of course, set up the entire robbery. She was just the decoy until her boyfriend came to rob us. But this next part that I'm about to share always makes my blood run cold. You see, the guy who robbed us held my brother at knife point and said that if he didn't comply that he would stab all of us upstairs as a punishment for him getting in the way. The cops asked my brother to give him a description, but he didn't. Later on the same day, we then heard a truck park on the side of the house. Whoever was in it, they yelled, threw a glass bottle down and drove off. I'm not sure if it was the same man who robbed us, but it terrified me nevertheless. I'm really grateful that nothing happened to my brother or my family, but I guess it just goes to show that you really just cannot trust anyone in this world. This story occurred a few years back. I would have been around 8 or 9 at the time. So my old bedroom sat facing out towards the street and also happened to be right next door to our front door. It was very small as it had been built in place of our old front porch. The roof was slanted downward, sort of towards the window, which took up most of the wall, and the bed could only fit in one way. It was painted purple, not a nice purple either, like a kid's bedroom, of course. But my bed sat facing towards the door to my bedroom, parallel to the window. My closet took up part of the corner between my bedroom door and the window, making for a sort of unusual space, I guess. And every night, I would always check to make sure the curtains were shut all the way, as the idea of people watching from the street made me really uncomfortable, even at a young age where things like that shouldn't have even really crossed my mind, I guess. Every night, I slept soundly, no nightmares, no sudden noises waking me in the middle of the night, nothing. That was until the middle of the year during a school break. I remember waking to the sound of just someone breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't catch my breath. I was just sort of stuck. But what I do remember seeing so clearly was a man stood in the corner of my room, stuck partly behind the curtain as if it would hide him. Of course, I could see him though. He was just this dark entity who stood and watched me. And after what felt like hours, I was able to get back to sleep. In the morning, I told my mum about what happened, and she explained that it was just a strange nightmare and that I would be fine. But the way she said it was just very not believable, I guess. These cases of sleep paralysis, too, went on for about a year, taking me up to the middle of the next year when I was likely 8 or 9. I remember waking in the middle of the night, just like I had most nights for the last year, to the man in the corner. Only this time, I could move. I didn't dare move though. I stayed absolutely still, despite now knowing that he was actually there. I could hear his faint breathing, like he was trying to hide from me as much as I was trying to hide from him. I couldn't help but think, has this man been here every night this year? I remember the thoughts that I had, how I would run out of the room and scream for my mum, how she would call the police, how this man would be arrested and sent away. But I just couldn't do that. I mean, he was basically in front of the door. Instead, I spent the night staring at him, trying to fall asleep. I'd say it was around 5 a.m. I was finally able to drift off, just sort of as the birds started to wake up, really. I woke up and, lo and behold, he was gone. The first thing that I did was tell my mum. She already looked uneasy, like she already knew as well. And that's when I heard 2 people talking outside. I found out later the people outside were my neighbour and a police officer who was taking an eyewitness statement. Because apparently, around 6 in the morning, our neighbour spotted a man standing outside of my window. She called the police, but he was gone before they arrived. Other neighbours stepped forward saying that they'd seen him outside in the middle of the day, looking at our house too. There were no signs of forced entry, only 2 footprints in the flower bed outside of my window. My mother told the officers my account of what happened, and they came to the conclusion that he'd done the same thing last year. I saw it, and it sparked my tangent of sleep paralysis. The streetlight outside projected his shadow, so it appeared as though he was standing in my room. This whole time, he'd been waiting patiently outside of my room. Honestly, who knows what would have happened too if my neighbor didn't spot him on her way out to work. Just a few minutes and she could have missed him entirely.